call to order the Charter Township of Oxford Planning Commission regular meeting for Thursday, April 25th, 2024. If we could all please rise, gentlemen, take your hats off and pay your respect to the flag. Can we note the roll? Okay. We have Mr. Spiz and Mr. Berger are absent, but we do have a quorum. I'd like a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda dated April 25th, 2024 at 7 p.m. for the Charter Township of Oxford Planning Commission regular meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussions or concerns? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Any conflict of interest or ex parte contact that needs to be addressed for this evening? Seeing none, we will move on to number 6, approval of the minutes. Planning Commission regular meeting for 11/24.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion we approve the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes for 11/20/24.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Number 7 is public comment on items that are not scheduled for public hearing or on this agenda. Is there anybody that would like to address for stuff that is not on tonight's agenda?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm Evelyn Archer, and I'm on Lakes Edge Drive. And I just want to give kudos and thank you to whoever is responsible for, maybe it's your body, zoning, not exactly sure, enforcement, whoever is responsible to affect the removal of that huge electronic messaging sign, which Jars Cannabis Shop put up on Lapeer south of Drainer. And it's not the Jars on Lakeville, the one that they have on Lakeville, but on Lapeer Road. It was jarring to the eye, and it was overwhelming. It was like a slap in the face to Radsco's next door and the other neighbors, and it sent a bad message about Oxford to approximately 40,000 commuters per day. So I just want to say thank you to whoever had that taken down.
Thank you. Did I see somebody else? Okay. Number 8, commissioners' comments. Any, start down at the end. Anybody have anything in that you bring up? Nothing? Okay. Then moving on to number 9, the public hearing. Preliminary site plan, residential plan unit development, PC 23-005, parcel 04 26 400 012 and 04 25 301 01. Applicant Silverado Custom Homes, P.O. Box 80214, Rochester, Michigan. Proposed new residential planned unit development of a 147-acre site located on the north side of Drainer between Oxford Lake Drive and James Hunt Drive. The proposed development is to construct 60 single-family detached units and 104 single-family attached units. And just because we have a large audience tonight, I'm going to go through the way this will proceed. We are going to start off, actually, I'm going to start off asking for a little education on what a PUD or a planned unit development is from our team over here. Then we're gonna have a presentation by the petitioner. We will open up the public hearing, public testimony. We will close that public hearing, then comments from our consultant team, engineers, etc. This board will review all correspondence, emails, things like that that we have received. There was one that was dropped off up here that we will recognize. Then this commission will have a discussion and make a motion. We will discuss that motion and then on a vote. As far as the public testimony, everybody is welcome to be heard. We encourage that, but we do have some guidelines. Any member of the public wishing to address the commission during a public hearing shall give their name, address, and position on the issue under the discussion. I will be keeping a list of topics so that we don't just have a redundancy. I'll go through, if somebody wants to talk about the flavor of ice cream being served, I'll put that on the list so that the next person gets up, they can just concur, agree, whatever, but they don't have to go into a long speech about not liking that flavor of ice cream. If what you're talking about has already been addressed, please just concur, add new items, and then we'll move on to the next person. We are gonna do this in an orderly fashion, so I'll just start over here and go down the row. So if you'd like to, come up to the podium, give your name, address, what you would like to talk about. Again, if somebody's already talked about what you wanna talk about, just say that you concur and then add new items. You will be given 3 minutes. I have an alarm that will go off at 2:45. Please wrap up any of your final thoughts, final comments, and at 3 minutes, I'll bang the gavel, and then we'll move on to the next person. So, all speakers shall address their remarks to this chair only, not to the developer, not to the audience, not to, just directly to this chair. No person shall be permitted to speak twice on the same issue until everyone wishing to be heard has had a chance to speak and everybody is done. No person other than a commission member, township consultant, or township staff shall be allowed to address issues for public hearing following the closing of that public hearing. So this is a one-way discussion to this chair, not to the audience or the petitioner. Okay? So before we get started with the petitioner, I've asked Megan to come up and just give this is what a PUD is, this is how it works, a little education.
Good evening, Megan Masson-Minnock. I'm with Carlo Wortman Associates. We're the planning consultants for Oxford Township. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity to talk a little bit more about what a residential plan unit development is and the process and a few details about what's being proposed. First, a residential PUD is a option that a developer chooses to bring forward in the circumstance where they are asking for a deviation or a waiver for a residential development from rules in the zoning ordinance. In response to that, they are supposed to also offer what is termed a recognizable and substantial benefit. They will go into more detail of what that is, and during your deliberations and our presentation after the public hearing, we can talk more about what makes a recognizable and substantial benefit. But I want to clarify at this point that that benefit should be both to the end users of the development and to the overall community, and be above and beyond what they could do under the rules of the zoning ordinance if they chose to develop a single family development according to in strict compliance with the rules of the zoning ordinance. The process for that is that the Planning Commission hears a preliminary PUD, which is before you tonight. You may approve it as it's presented. You may approve it with conditions, or you may postpone. you can postpone to a date certain or a date uncertain. And I'll defer to the township attorney to talk more about that if need be. Also, what you should note is that the modification that is being asked for is, the main modification is that instead of only having single-family detached lots, so only a single-family house on an individual lot, which is required by zoning for this subject site, they are asking for up to 104 of those dwelling units to be what's called attached single-family, so they're either duplexes or triplexes. And that's the modification that they're asking for. They're not asking for a density bonus. They've submitted a conventional plan which shows how the site could be laid out as single-family houses with individual lots. That conventional plan would be 173 single-family houses. They are proposing actually less dwelling units because they're proposing in total 164 dwelling units. 60 of those are proposed to be single-family lots and 104 single-family attached, either in duplex or triplex units.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from anybody on the committee? Okay. All right, then what we will do is we will open up for a presentation by the petitioner.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to open up the public hearing at 7:14.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second to open the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing at 7:15. Is the petitioner ready to present?
Yes. Good evening. I'm Tom Turnbull, the Suave Real Estate Group. We're the owner of the property, along with our builder, Silverado Homes. We brought this forward. I brought a team with us today that is going to present the details that you've been reviewing. Suave Real Estate Group has been involved in this community for 20-plus years. We started down on West Rainer, Oxford Woods, Oxford Meadows, Paint Creek, the Moors of Oxford, and most recently did the south side of Drainer Road on the east side, the Woods of Tullamore. This project on the north that we're bringing forth today is part of that same parcel, but it's 2 phases across the road. We're calling it the Woods, sorry, the Peninsula and the Village. John Thompson with PPA is going to go through the details, and we've got other supporting staff with us as well if there are any other questions. I think John should be able to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing us.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, planning commissioners. My name is John Thompson. I'm a professional engineer and a land development consultant with DEA Group. Megan stole my intro, so I'm not really sure where to go from here.
Oh, you can go ahead and recap.
Oh, okay. So just a little history on the property. It's 145 acres with a formal gravel pit. In 2003, the petitioner, the township through the same petitioner approved a preliminary plat. That preliminary plat was 117 single-family homes. Part of that approval process, they obtained a permit from Eagle and a wetland permit, and they granted the conservation easements associated with that permit and dedicated those, even though the site wasn't developed. So we have an underlying set of easements that are around the site that, as I talk further, we're proposing to have modified. So from 2003, fast forward 20 years, December of 2023, we made our initial submittal for this development. There were staff reviews. We went through and revised our plans based on the staff reviews. And in February of 24, we resubmitted the plans, which are the plans you see before you today. So a little bit about our development and why we would want to utilize the new PUD ordinance. By right, under the current R1A zoning, we could build 173 single-family homes. Utilizing the PUD ordinance allows us to develop a mixed use of both single-family and multifamily homes that would otherwise not be allowed under your straight zoning ordinance. Utilizing the PUD also provides you more preservation of land, or requires us to provide a minimum of 25% preservation of open space. Whereas under the 173 single-family homes, the site would likely be clear-cut and 173 homes would be built. So our 164 unit mixed development of 60 single-family and 104 multifamily homes will provide a range of varying price points that are intended to meet the demand of both the single-family homes, multifamily homes, and the missing middle. We utilize the 50-foot road, private road option. So instead of a 60-foot public, we're going with a 50-foot private in order to pull our houses in closer to the road, which allowed us to increase the amount of preservation on the rear of the site where we had higher quality woodlands. We're here today to guarantee that we're going to have a minimum of 30% open space. So we're going to exceed that open space minimum requirement of 5%, which is, the requirement is 25. We're going to exceed that by 5% at least. The development incorporates both passive and active recreational areas in the form of trails, lookout vistas, gathering areas, a pickleball court, along with over 30 acres of open space. Of the 145 acre site, we're only developing 23% of it. Now that's just a brief intro. If you'd like me to continue through, I'd like to jump into the consultant's reviews and respond to them.
Sure.
So I'll take the easy ones first. Both engineering and fire department recommend approval. We of course will meet all of their conditions as part of site plan approval. So we'll get into the Carlisle review. The first topic in the Carlisle review letter was important information for the planning commission to consider. There were 3 items in there. So I'll briefly go over each one of those. The first item, and if you should have a packet with you, so if you want to follow through the Carlisle letter. First item was traffic implications for the development on nearby intersections. You have a lengthy traffic report in your package, which we've submitted. There were some comments from the road commission. We've had several meetings with the road commission, and we're currently in negotiations or discussions with them on what their final requirements will be. We would anticipate that, again, just like engineering and fire department, as well as planning, that our site plan approval would be contingent upon final outcome of the road commission's requirements. Second item, allowing for modified landscape boulevard. And I believe there's the way this is written, there's two situations here. One of the items that road commission was asking for was some turn lanes and decel lanes and things like that, and we've worked most of those out with the road commission. But the second item was related to the entrance at Oxford Lake and Gillespie. And I think we submitted information to the township, and we shared that with the Oxford Township HOA. But just briefly, when Oxford Lake subdivision was installed, and I don't know the exact history, but something to the effect of Oxford Lake property was dedicated from the original parcels of the Oxford Lake subdivision. They installed or created a series of spike strips or narrow parks on the edge of the right-of-way. The reason for that, 100% I don't know. My guess was the original developers were trying to prevent having multiple driveways that would be entering Oxford Lake Road to try to keep a private road per se, opposed public. So, but in turn with that, the approvers created a gap of 60 feet directly opposite of Gillespie. And the purpose of that was, in theory, to extend Gillespie in the future. So the driveway, our proposed driveway to Oxford Lake Road would fit within the 60-foot gap that was left for us. The second part of that is the new PUD ordinance requires that all entrance points to the PUD have a landscape boulevard entrance. Because of the limit of 60 feet, we would be unable to install a boulevard entrance, and we propose to do a standard 2-lane road that would match the width of Gillespie. Number 3, the intent and benefits associated with planning unit developments and whether the proposed development meets those requirements. So I guess what I'd like to do, since this ordinance is new to all of us, is just step through all the articles within the ordinance. So Article 14.1 is the purpose of intent, and this is basically the definition of what this ordinance is. So there's nothing really to discuss except for the fact that we now understand how to proceed with PUD. Section 14.2 grants you the authority and the township the authority in which to utilize the PUD. 14.3, and this is one of the 2 big portions of the ordinance. These are the 4 qualifying conditions, and the conditions are explaining the recognizable benefits, that the owner has recognized control, the property is contiguous, and lastly, the superior design, which is the other major meat and potatoes of this section. So with respect to recognizable substantial benefit, we are providing a mixed-use housing with a range of price points, which is one of the things that the Township Master Plan encourages. We're reclamating a blighted gravel pit. The conditions that were left are not the safest. Steep slopes, large containers, half buried. So this is going to be cleaning up a hazardous, potentially hazardous site. We are requesting no density bonus. Typically, the purpose of the PUD is to try to get the developer as much density as possible. We are actually, as I stated earlier, proposing 9 less houses than would be allowed under a straight by right R1A zoning. We are exceeding the minimum open space requirement. And the ordinance says that we need to meet 2 elements, a minimum of 2 elements of the superior design section. We're going to meet several of them. The second point of the 4.3 PUD is that we have unified control, and indeed the applicant has unified control. Third is it's contiguous, and it is. Fourth is under section 14.3D states that we shall provide at least 2 superior elements as set forth in Article 14.8C, and we meet 6 out of the 10 superior design elements. And to go over those, that would be item B, which is buffer, which we are providing preservation of existing woodlands. We are providing a 25-foot buffer along Oxford Lake, and we are maintaining screening along Blood Lake, being one of the critical, better quality woodlands within the site. Second is landscaping, and there were 2 points there. One, as I mentioned, we're doing the reduced right-of-way, so from a 60-foot to a 50-foot to give us 10 more feet around the perimeters. And our site landscaping will utilize native species, which is one of the other points within that section. Item E, dwelling. The ordinance encourages the use of 2-family and 3-family dwellings, of which we're providing 160. Item H, public dedication. As part of this development we have offered the township the land at the southeast corner of the site. That would be down at Drainer and James Hunt Drive. There's a small area that people will park their cars at and put their kayaks or other non-motorized vehicles into Tullamore Lake. So we have offered to dedicate that property to the township as a public benefit. Item I, there are 4 sections within the architectural details. We are going to provide high-quality materials with variations of exterior designs, materials, patterns, and colors. And again, with the team tonight, we have Matt from Silverado Homes and JR from TR Design to discuss any of the architectural elements that you'd like if you want to get into the dirty about what we're presenting in terms of how that meets the architectural quality. And last, the 6th item within the superior design is other. And other is defined basically the definition of the PUD ordinance. And that's without the PUD ordinance, we would not be able to, we would develop a conventional subdivision with more lots, with more land cleared, and without open space preservation. And we could not provide a mixed-use development. So those 6 items, in our opinion, meet the superior design elements, so we've exceeded that. On to Article 14.4. 14.4 is the general provisions. Without getting into the weeds, we will meet, or do and will meet all the general provisions. There's 5 of them. Permitted uses, residential is permitted under, that would be 14.5. Lastly is Article 14, not lastly, but next, is 14.6, which is the design standards. There are 12 design standards. This is where our proposed modifications come in. We will meet all of the design standards with exception to, I'll say, 5 to 7 items, 5 of which we submitted in your package, and 2, as we were discussing the project, thought it was questioned whether or not it was a waiver or not, so we bring that to you to ask you your thoughts on it. So first, C.5, this is a request, and these are in order of the way the ordinance is written in terms of the design standards. C.5, we are requesting a waiver from 100 feet, from the 100-foot boundary setback in 2 areas. On the plan along Oxford Lake, units 47 through 50 and 54 through 64. 54 through 64, we are providing or proposing a 60-foot wide boundary setback versus the 100. We are also including a 20-foot wide buffer of existing trees. That would buffer us and Oxford Lake Road, hopefully meeting the intent of trying to keep what looks like a lot of houses sitting on Oxford Lake. Item 2 of C.5, of our proposed variance of C.5. Along the easterly property line, that would be units, well, it's north and east, units 1 through 4 and 30 through 41, we are proposing a 20-foot boundary setback to the property line. This waiver would allow for a superior design over conventional single-family development, because it allows us to preserve the high-quality woodlands along Mud Lake. And these are the reasons we would request this waiver. The area along the eastern boundary of the property encompassing lots 1 through 4 and 30 through 41 were fully cleared in the past when it was a gravel pit. There is significantly disturbed during that mining time. And this area is predominantly, as we looked at the trees out there, we had a botanist and a certified forester walk through the site. So this area that we're trying to encroach into is predominantly short-lived pioneer trees or volunteer trees, because they built up after the activity has completed. And they're primarily invasive species. Things that I don't know the terms of, but oriental, bittersweet are common throughout, which are trees that we don't want, invasive trees. So in doing so, to build in the areas with the poor quality woodlands, we're able to preserve areas with better woodlands and provide more screening to the perimeters of the site. In addition, we're providing more developed and undeveloped areas in excess of the required open spaces. We talked, we will meet or exceed 30%. Waiver number 2 is just C.6. We are requesting a waiver to grade into the 25-foot wetland buffer. What we've got on site right now, the former gravel pit, are steep slopes that we have proposed to grade. These are 1-on-2 slopes. These are not a condition in which we want people around. So what we'd like to be able to do is grade down to the water's edge, pull these slopes back, smooth them out, and make them safe for everyone. So we're essentially eliminating a hazardous condition. And then upon the completion of our work, we'll revegetate that 25-foot buffer. So now we have a nice shoreline with a slope that's acceptable, and we'll return that so it becomes the existing BMP that it is. Waiver number 3 is to F.3. We're requesting a waiver of the boulevard entrance to Oxford Lake Road, as we discussed previously. That's a 60-foot right-of-way. To provide a boulevard to RCOC standards, we have to be greater than 80 feet, which we don't have a building. Waiver number 4 is to G1.C. And that section says that all cul-de-sac islands shall be landscaped. We talked to staff and the fire marshal, and they were in agreement that an island wasn't required nor preferred. So our waiver is that we will not provide a landscaped cul-de-sac because we will have no cul-de-sac island. Our 5th waiver is H.3, and we're requesting a waiver. H.3, and again, that's a duplicate to C.6, which is requesting a waiver to grade within the 25-foot wetland buffer. So same exact argument as C.6. There's also 2 additional waivers that I mentioned, and that was actually to Article, I'll talk about that in a second. So 2 additional possible waivers. So moving on to Article 14.7, that's the open space standards. We meet those requirements and we're exceeding those requirements. Again, that's a 25% minimum. We're providing a minimum of 30%. Moving on to Article 14.8, which is additional lots or units. And as I said previously, we're proposing no additional lots, despite the fact that we may qualify for an additional 34 more units over our conventional plan. So that takes the total, utilizing the additional lot ordinance, additional lot article, that we potentially could build 207 single-family homes on this property. That takes me through the first section of Megan's review. Did you want to ask any questions about that, or should I continue into the Planning Commission decisions, determinations, and findings?
Are there any questions, or?
You talked about additional 2 more waivers.
Yeah, I'll get into that towards the end if I could. Mr. Chair.
Yes, some questions.
One more question.
Is now, should I
Yeah.
wait till later?
Go ahead.
Before we have more discussion.
Go ahead.
So, developer indicated that they've been in the area for 20 years developing property. Is that right? I heard that.
I believe that's what you said, yeah.
Our master plan clearly indicates that this community is looking for larger lot, lower density, and the community's rural character is the most favorable features of this community. That's the 2019 master plan, so that's been around for a while, right? We're asking for 25-foot disturbance within the wetland.
Correct.
Okay. What recognizable and substantial benefit does that bring to both the development and this community?
Well, it provides you a mix of price points. We'll have the single-family homes being at the higher end, of course, and the multifamily being towards the more agreeable, more acceptable price range or entry-level price range. So you have a mix of ranges in terms of your price point of your homes, but they're also creating, the other points that I mentioned with respect to those benefits as in terms of the donation to the township on the property, as well as the, just getting back to my notes here. Oh, sorry. So I'll just recap on the recognizing substantial benefits that I read earlier. Providing a mix of housing, reclamation of a blighted gravel pit, that we're requesting no density bonus. We're asking for 164 homes on a potential of over 200. We're exceeding the open space requirements, as well as far exceeding the minimum requirements for the specific design elements.
Mr. Chair, I have a few more questions, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
The comments that were made about the Kyle Workman planner review, you made those earlier about meeting the requirements of the recognizable and substantial benefit. It appears that there's some things that need to be worked out between the comments that you made and the comments that are in the report about meeting all the standards. You mentioned something about meeting, how many of the standards you exceed, as I say, 2 minimum?
6 out of the 10 is what we
6 out of
need,
the 10
or we have out of the 2.
As I'm reading through the consultant's report, I think you barely meet 2, according to that report. So there's significant detail that needs to be worked out there, and I don't think this is quite the opportunity to do that. If
We can talk about it when.
okay.
And we can certainly drill into any one of those items if you want. That's the part of the PUD that's great, is that we can negotiate back and forth and explain.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure there's a clear contrast between what you said and what I read in the report. That's all, which is part of the packet. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I screwed up my notes, of course, and I didn't order them in per sheet. All right, so section 2, or the next section within the Carlisle report, is the Planning Commission decisions, determinations, and findings, of which there were 2 items in. And some of this becomes redundant, as we've already started to talk about our modifications and things, but I'll just briefly go through those items. Each one had 3 or 4 bullet points within it. So the Planning Commission determination if waiver should be granted for missing information noted below. A, extend the tree line of the existing woodlands on the site. The extent of the tree line of the existing woodlands on site should be shown on P1 and P2, that's the topo sheets, as well as indication of natural vegetation to remain as part of the development. We did not conduct a tree survey. I will say the majority of the site is treed, but keep in mind that this site was a reclaimed gravel pit, and that most of the site, the site was mostly stripped for its resources, and there were no long-term trees. Trees that have grown up have been since that activity. That being said, we are proposing to preserve approximately 12 acres of existing woodlands, and we're extensively planting the developed open space areas. So not only are we keeping the existing, we're adding significant more. 1B, that section, per section 14.d, clarification, should be provided on P5 to whether mechanical treatment structures will be above or below grade. The answer to that is below grade. Item C, undeveloped open space calculations should be clearly provided on sheet L1. Current terminology uses of open space. Those items were updated in the resubmittal. The table that appears on is 1.0, I believe, or 1.3. Sorry, 1.3. The open space is calculated as shown on the dimension plan, which would be 1.0. See, of which we have 18 acres approximately of developed open space, 12 acres of undeveloped open space, for a total of 30 acres of open space, or 21% of the upland on the site. The way we calculated trees in the open space, the ordinance says 1 tree per 3,000 square foot of open space. Our calculations are based on open space for the developed open space areas. The idea of providing trees in the undeveloped area, the ordinance didn't speak to. To me, it made sense that I wasn't going to add a tree in an open space that already was forested. So our calculations are based on the open space of the developed open space area. Item D was indicate site lighting. We will be providing lighting on the coach lights and the garages. Item 2, Planning Commission determination of whether or not to waive, whether or not a waiver should be granted. The following requirements are listed below. The first item there was with respect to the 100-foot boundary setback. Again, we have a few locations within the site that we're requesting. Again, along Oxford Lake Road, that's 47 through 50, and 54 through 64, in which we're requesting a 60-foot wide boundary setback, which would be inclusive of 25-foot buffer that we're going to maintain and enhance along Oxford Lake Road. Along the easterly property line, which would be lots northerly and easterly, would be lots 1 through 4, which are up against Lost Lake, as well as 30 through 34, which is adjacent to Crossroads. We're requesting a 20-foot boundary setback from the property line. And again, I'll be a little repetitive here, as this was kind of addressed previously. The reasons for that, the waiver allows us to do a superior design over conventional single-family development. There's low-quality vegetation along the areas that we would be proposing, that we are encroaching into as part of the waiver, and it allows us to preserve other areas with better woodlands and screening. Last, we're providing, it sounds redundant, I understand, we are providing in excess of the minimum required open space. The next item on that was the waiver to the landscape cul-de-sac. As we discussed, the fire marshal was agreeable to removing that. Third, frontage east of the 4 existing lots on Drainer Road not being included in the landscape requirements. Now this is the area that is Tullamore Lake. So we thought it was impractical to plant trees along Drainer Road when the edge of water is literally against the right of way of Drainer Road. So we are requesting a waiver from planting frontage trees along the lake. Fourth was the requirement that Oxford Lake Drive entrance be a landscape boulevard, and we've talked about that. It's only 60 foot. Last, the safety path should be extended east to Drainer Road, to the east of the Drainer Road entrance, our proposed Drainer Road entrance, We had discussions with staff about this, and we all agreed that the existing 4 houses will probably never grant the right of way to extend that path any further to the east. If they did, we'd be into the lake. So there's no practical way to extend a sidewalk on the north side of the road east of the 4 houses across the lake. With that, we thought the best decision would be to bring the safety path up to our proposed entrance and extend it west to connect into the village. And these were the 2 items that I talked about, Mr. Knoll, that I was unsure whether or not we needed a variance or not, or a waiver or not. And that was with regards to the landscape of the 1 tree per 3,000 square foot of the developed open space area versus all of the open space area. So again, for my purposes, my thought process, to add a tree in an area that already has a tree, because we're not touching it, just didn't make practical sense to me. So I didn't know, just based on the way I interpreted the ordinance, I think probably defer to Megan on this as well, whether or not it made sense, if my idea of providing a tree for every area of open space that we were going to clear versus not clear, if that was a violation of the ordinance or not. So that's why I asked your opinion, whether or not that is indeed a proposed waiver. And I think, and I'll retract the 7th, because it was with regards to the landscape cul-de-sac, and we had already put that on there, so. So that was one additional potential waiver from the original 5 that we submitted.
I have a question for you on the buffers. The ones going along Oxford Lake, lots 1 through 4, and then 30 through 41, where you're asking for the shorter buffer. Is that, would those houses be allowed to put a deck or patio on the back of those houses, or is it the back of their house that it's in?
Along Oxford Lake, and the answer would be yes, they could. Along Oxford Lake Road, there is 40 feet from the property line to the house. Sorry, 60 feet. So there's, on Oxford Lake, there's 60 feet. There's a 25-foot buffer and a 40-foot open space, of which we'll put decks, landscaping, storm sewer, and additional trees in. So yes.
Clarification, in that open space you're talking about, were there gonna be, did you say there was trees already gonna be there that you're not gonna cut, or is it's gonna be in the open space? What is it, will it be existing trees that you just won't cut down, or will it be grass?
Yes. So we have developed, and this is where the definition of open space comes from, right? And how to interpret this. We have developed open space and undeveloped open space. So the undeveloped open space will be existing woodlands that we're gonna maintain. And the developed open space is gonna be areas that we're gonna have to utilize to grade in and reclaim the land. But we're gonna dedicate it still as open space. So it was those areas that we were disturbing, that we said, let's plant trees in there at a ratio of 1 to 3,000. But to try to plant trees in an area that's already treed didn't make sense.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So I read that there were 2 parks gonna be donated to it. There's 1 park now?
I don't know of a second park.
Yeah. Could it have been out in the northeast area where the possible gathering area was?
Use the mic.
I don't believe we ever, there's no way to get public access to that area, so I don't believe, we talked about parks in terms of on-site parks or gathering areas, so that was not a park for the public, but a possible, and part of the issue was, we just don't know how dense it is. We know it's dense, but we just don't know if it's feasible to get a park/outlook area up in that area. So we had identified specific park/gathering areas within the development and I labeled that one up in the north corner as potential, just because grading and density of the existing invasive trees was really thick up in that area, so we wanted to say, we're hoping to put a park or a gathering area for the subdivision, for the condominium up there, just don't know if it's feasible yet, so we'll wait till we get further along before we say whether or not we're gonna add that one in. So in terms of public property, it was just the area James Hunt granted.
I had a very difficult time following and writing all your waivers and all those things. And I went through the paperwork that we had. I came up with about 8 waivers. You came up with 7. I stand to be corrected, but again, I had trouble following you. But there were modifications to the easements. There was site grading, 25-foot buffer. There's a stormwater waiver that we have to grant. There's a safety path waiver that we have to grant. There's pre-proposed setback under 100-foot minimum. We have to have a modification for. There's a boulevard entrance to Oxford Lake Drive at Gillespie. There's the waiver for open space tree specifications area in sheet 1, L1.0, and the landscaping for the cul-de-sac. So I've had a hard time trying to get this all under wraps because we've had some really good consultant write-ups that I've gone through and tried to glean out of those the best I could.
Commissioner Knoll, they can't hear you in the back. Can you
Oh, you're
hold your
fine.
mic? Thank you.
So I think that we're in agreement with Megan's review. There were 5, I added 1 more that I was questionable whether his waiver or not. So I think in part, I may have combined a couple areas that were redundant in the ordinance in terms of like the 25-foot wetland setback, because that appeared in 2 separate items within the ordinance, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
So I'm interpreting, and I'm open, and we're certainly willing to discuss that, I'm interpreting 6 at this point.
The setback issue on Oxford Lake Drive. We have the road, we have a strip of property there that has trees on it, then we have the property line, then we have 60 feet to the back of the house.
From the property line to the back of the house, yes.
You talked about a 20-foot buffer. Where was that 25?
25-foot wide existing trees, so when we were out there looking at the vegetation and existing woodlands, there's a nice row of pine trees
Correct.
right along Oxford Lake Road. We wanted to preserve those. So we went out and, so we went out and looked at the trees that were on our property, and said the majority of those trees that fit within the first 25 feet. So the quality trees fit within the first 25 feet of the property. So
Where I'm going with this is that we have a lot of development down the road, and I had it written down and I don't remember the exact details. We have Tullamore at 48 homes. We have the Clearview at, somebody help me here? 85 homes that isn't developed at all yet. We have a need in the future to get residents of Oxford Township into the village or into the township by other means than the road. So what I'm suggesting or talking about is if there's a safety path or a sidewalk that could be put up along that area of Oxford Lakes Drive to ensure that we can get residents into the village and or to the township by other means than drive.
well, we're providing 2 connections to pathways to the village. One at the Drainer Road entrance and one at the Gillespie Road entrance. The remaining property along Oxford Lake has a spike strip on it. We can't get access to it.
I understand that, and that's why I was very careful how I worded that. We have the Oxford Lakes Drive, we have a curb, we have the spike area there, which I don't know the dimensions of, then we have your property. On your property area, could we put a sidewalk or could we put a safety path up through there to get to the village and or move residents township around.
I would propose to you that only 150 feet further to the east, we have a sidewalk on the new subdivision roads that interconnects and will provide that same connectivity.
And I don't think we can cross their property with the sidewalk. Correct.
Cross their property with the sidewalk, we cannot.
Okay.
You lost me there, everybody lost me.
I think we were back to the spike strip.
I see. But if you ran that up north and south, all the way to the area where your drive is, that meets at Gillespie Street, then you could fulfill that L of the corner of your property with adequate non-motorized transportation. Just a thought. I mean, that's something that I'm working with. The other thing that I'm struggling with is that this is the place where I don't want to take things away from our consultants, but your traffic pattern study. The study I felt was very general, was very vague. The closing last paragraph didn't do anything in regards to the quantity of homes that are going to be in the Tullamore 48 and the new subdivision of 85. It also talked about a drive-by and a window view out the front windshield, and someone was very keen to see 14 homes in Clearview. I've not been able to come up with 14 homes in Clearview. I'm being a little sarcastic. They're not. So I'm questioning that entire study to see if we want to redo that study to make sure that we encompass the development, those two developments when they're fulfilled, plus your development when it's fulfilled, and the pressure of traffic it's going to be putting that half-mile quadrant right there.
Well, what I can tell you is that I'm not a traffic engineer, and we don't have a traffic engineer here with us tonight. But our traffic engineering consultants met with road commission and took into everything that the road commission required. And I can't speak to how far they went out and what they did exactly, to be honest. So
Is this something that we can table when you guys do your reports and then get further into it? One clarifying question, just because I didn't see, I agree with Mr. Knoll about the sidewalk going up to Gillespie, but doesn't the inside have safety paths? I mean, I know it's a little further, people are walking across, but somebody could walk across and then the safety path in the development, correct?
all of our roads have sidewalks on them. So if you were to say, do you want one in the rear yard of everyone's houses? I would contend that, no, I don't. I would say go over 150 feet and utilize the road sidewalk.
So somebody coming off Gillespie could walk on a safety path into the development all the way down to Drainer.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Just one housekeeping thing. We are gonna have a section where people can talk. This is not the time, so please, we've had some outbursts and comments. Please keep them quiet until we're to that point. Thank you. You had a question?
I had a couple.
Okay.
Number one, can you explain why you cut the roads to 50 feet instead of 60? If you go through some of these subdivisions today, people are not only parked in the driveways, but they've got cars parked along the side in front of their homes. And it makes it very difficult then for somebody to navigate their way through with the narrower roads.
The road width and design still meets all the RCOC 2-lane with parking on one side requirements. So the road itself didn't get any smaller. It's the road, it's the easement or the right-of-way. In this case, because it's private, it becomes an easement versus a public right-of-way. It's the easement of which it's in. Utilizing a 50-foot right-of-way allows us to bring the houses 10 feet closer to the road. That allowed us to preserve the trees in the back another 10 feet on both sides. So we're preserving an additional 20 foot of woodland in the backyard to bring our house, to draw our house in 10 feet in the front yard.
Second question has to do with the James Hunt Drive. I know you have an easement. I know you've agreed to pave that as an emergency road. once you get to this area, if anything happens any place along here, the only escape route is this emergency path. Shouldn't we consider to be making this a exit road or road?
We could certainly consider that, but we don't own that property.
I understand, I
So,
know you have an easement and you have.
It would be a worthwhile discussion. It's and I don't know, Tom may have talked to them to see if there was any interest in that. What the agreement was between the two owners was that they would agree to put an easement across for the EVA.
I know the road because I just drove it this weekend, but when you really look at your layout, people on the west end have two entrances for getting in and getting out. If anything happens on this other road, at any point, you've blocked a certain number of people in.
That's correct, Dave.
And we ought to try to resolve that if we're gonna have a benefit to the community.
Well, I would contend that a typical subdivision, under 30 units and non-sprinkled, would be a typical one-way in and out of any subdivision.
I know that this is a PUD, and part of it is benefits for the community as well as for the subdivision.
Certainly understand that.
So I just ask that you go back and look at, see what could be done there. Okay, that's all I have.
And just for clarification, I know you mentioned the areas up front that are multifamily. Just because I know there were some questions at the last meeting from the community. These are not like small apartment type thing. These are attached, like 2 and 3 unit houses, like what's over on Stony Drive.
Correct, and if you'd like to, the architects brought boards about, and elevations and floor plans. So if you'd like to go through there, I'm happy to defer at that point, or we could.
I've seen them, but I know there were some questions at the last time that, you know, that we were bringing in apartments or that type of thing. I just wanted to clarify that's not the case.
No, this is single family living.
Okay.
It just happens to have a common wall.
Okay, that's, any other questions or?
I have to keep going,
One last
sorry.
comment.
Okay, keep going.
I just have one last comment, if you don't mind. Before you wrap up, you know, reading further in the master plan, there's a section on page 70 that talks about protecting Oxford's natural resources from the adverse effects of development. And the first strategy indicated in there is to continue to enforce natural feature buffers required by the zoning ordinance. And you're asking us to, as part of this application, to forego those.
I wouldn't use the word forgo at all.
You're asking for the modification. You're asking to move material within 25-foot buffer of the wetland, right? You're asking to build homes within 100 feet of other lot lines,
Correct.
which is against the PUD.
Correct.
And it says shall in the PUD. It's not should or could or maybe or it's not a guideline. It's an ordinance. So it puts this commission, I believe, in a very difficult position.
The PUD is established as, the PUD ordinance was established as a means of give and take. The PUD ordinance provides a very specific section within the ordinance that defines the criteria for waivers. The idea is that we're going to give you a better development than what I would give you under a conventional plan.
I don't disagree. Just the starting point, I believe, is within the PUD requirement. Mr. Chair, I think that's we can move on.
Okay, go ahead and continue.
The last section. So the last section is potential conditions. Megan included 10 conditions within that. We are agreeable to all 10 of those with one modification or proposed edit on number 9. Number 9 says conservation easements must be vacated prior to final site plan approval. I'd like to change that word to amended. We don't plan on vacating the entire series of Eagle easements. We want to make a couple small modifications to them. With that, I want to thank you for letting us present tonight. We feel that the development meets and exceeds the requirements for the PUD ordinance, and we ask for your recommendation this evening. For any additional questions, I'm happy.
When you say potential modifications to the Eagle report, what do you anticipate?
There's a letter in your package from John Jones of Eagle that starts to discuss those things. We've met with them 2 or 3 times now with our consultant, our environmental consultant, wetland consultant, our engineering. There are areas that were not wetland, that currently are not wetlands, that were shown as wetlands previously. And in part, that original preliminary plat, which is no longer valid, imposed easements across the property that were custom exclusive to that preliminary plat. So as we were modifying our new layout, there's areas that are encroaching, there's areas that aren't wetlands and have been deemed by Eagle as we're not sure if they were ever wetlands. So we're looking to increase and decrease and potentially add more easements to the property in agreement with Eagle and their requirements.
And is that something you would oversee, Tim? Is that something you would have oversight on, or?
Yes.
Okay,
Once they get it, they would turn it into us.
okay. Okay, any last questions? Or do you?
I'm good. Do you want to bring the architects up and show the elevations? Would you like that?
I'm not sure how best you want me to display these or send them along the counter for you guys to look at.
We have them in our packet, if you want to
Okay.
make them visible to the community, I think that's a problem. Oh, we've got a display board.
Okay. Good evening. My name is J.R. Ruthig, Principal Designer at TR Design Group. I was asked here to come tonight just to, in case questions arose regarding the architecture. So a couple of things I can add on to what the engineer was saying was that, at least your question, the attached, when sometimes there's a difficulty between multifamily and attached single-family living. So any of the attached units that are being referred to tonight are usually like duplexes and threeplexes. There's no stack units. These would be individual units, and most of the designs, we don't have any floor plans tonight. They're all 2 and 3 bedroom ranch options, and then they might have optional second floor bedroom or flex rooms, but they're all kind of designed around being a ranch setup. There won't be any unit of another unit, over top of one another. So they live like a ranch, single family home with an attached common wall. There's no units, to my knowledge, that are over threeplexes. And the majority of them are actually duplexes, and I think we even have a couple of single units in that package too. So just to answer your question from before, that's what we're talking about. I'm gonna move the boards around so some of the individuals can see. I have a really loud voice. Is it okay if I talk from here so I can move the boards?
Sure.
So what you see here is an example of what a duplex would be. They're basically designed in a craftsman style, low maintenance materials, but definitely not high-rise buildings or apartments in which can be confused with multifamily versus single-family attached living. This is another example. This is a threeplex building. So it's basically this plus one more. And again, we're using varied elevations so that you're not looking at the same building over and over again. We have, like right now tonight, these are three base elevation looks. They're all completely different, and we plan if the development goes forward and we do more architecture, there's gonna be more premium elevations offered on top of this. So there's gonna be more looks than 2 or 3 different elevations. That way it looks like a single family community. In regards to the single family homes, there's gonna be there will probably be up to 3 to 4 different plan designs. They'll offer different designs in terms of ranch living, master down with secondary bedrooms up, and colonials. So there will be a mix for all different buyers. They'll have premium elevation looks. There'll be multiple elevations for each plan, just like most of the typical subdivision developments that you see around. And they're all gonna meet or exceed the materials and quality that's being developed out there now and built in similar subdivisions across the street, across Drainer. And obviously Silverado Homes is the builder. You're familiar with them. They build in your community now. So other than that, I'm not sure what else I can add to the architecture part. Obviously, I really can't talk to any of the site development issues that are going on here, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them. Oh, square footages, they're not finalized yet. Obviously, we're in planning, but on the attached units, you would ask the question, these aren't small. I would say the minimum square footages we've been looking at on those on the single story is, under 2,000, but probably starting at like 1,700, and then they can go up from there if they take some of the second floor options. And then on the single family units, non-attached, I think they range between 2,000 and 2,600 square foot, and then they have options that they want to go slightly bigger than that. So to answer your question, no, there's not really any small units. That's associated generally with apartment living or multifamily. And one last comment, just from my perspective, doing these developments all over the country, I wouldn't necessarily associate the combined living as entry level. Okay, they serve a lot of purposes for diversity within a community. Empty nesters, actually, when you do ranch developments, 2 and 3, two bedroom study, 3 bedroom ranch, 2 bedroom with 1 up. That's not really just startup buyers. That's taking care of our empty nester community with low maintenance packages. They don't have single family yards to take care of and things like that. So I know that was discussed earlier, but I just want to add that in. Doing this every day for the last 30 years, that also adds something to the community. Being able to offer those home buyers a way to stay in rather than have to move out if they lived in the community before that. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything you have.
I have a question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. In the consultant's review of the architectural details, in their opinion, the details do not meet a superior design element standard, which seems to...
I'm not sure. In terms of quality, they meet or exceed everything that's being asked there and what's being built around.
Okay.
Brick, stone, wood siding, and low maintenance siding materials, and they're all existing out there now. So I'm not sure how they would have to ask me a specific question about.
Yeah, there's probably some detail needs to be worked out there for sure. Because there's again a contrast between what's being said and what our consultants have indicated in their review.
No problem. And yeah, the complete package hasn't been, obviously, all the premium elevations and all that haven't been designed yet because we have to know what we're designing for.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you. Was anybody else from the petitioner side gonna address anything, or you guys good? Okay. And with that, I will open it up to public testimony. Again, I'm gonna go over the rules again real quick. Any member wishing to speak, shall give their name, address, and position. Again, I'll be making a detailed list, so, please, we want to hear from everybody. Just a second. We want to hear from everybody, but add to what somebody else has already said. If you are just going to say the same thing, just be on record, I concur, and I want to add this. If you're just going to say the same thing, then just I concur, and let's move on to the next person. Again, your remarks are to this chair only. It is not an open discussion with the developer. They've made their presentation. All discussions will come up here. You have one opportunity to speak. When everybody's done, if there's still time available and there's something else you want to add that's new, so be it. And I know last time there were some questions about development with overpopulating the schools and things, so I know I said we were going to start over here, but I am going to ask to start with a representative of the school, just to address some of that.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Sam Barna. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations for Oxford Community Schools. The address is 10 North Washington Street in downtown Oxford, 48371. And again, thank you for having me. I don't want to speculate, but I had heard that this development or a portion of it is a 55 and older community. Whether that's true or not, I just want to address it and say if that is indeed true, I would just like to have the board here consider that the school district is not at full enrollment. We are actually in many of our grades below contractual rates. And so in general, last year we had a demographer do a forecast for us for student enrollment. And the demographer in general for us, in particular in Michigan in general, I'm sure many have heard this, the birthing rates are declining. And for us in particular in Oxford, we're graduating more than are coming in the door as kindergartners. So I just want to settle that and say that we do have room to grow. Our seated enrollment is declining, but our OVA and virtual space has and continues to grow. But again, we overall had a seated decline over the last several years. So again, I don't want to make any assumptions, but if it is indeed a portion of this development is restricted to 55 and older, I would just strongly recommend that that be reconsidered. Due to also the fact that many that are 55 and older, not all, but many aren't, promoting bond and sinking fund millages for the school district to help grow and also to help maintain, obviously, our buildings for those that are attending the school district. So, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, what we'll do is we'll start over on this side. If there's anybody in the front row, we'll just kind of go around. If you would like to get up, speak, come up to the podium. Again, you get 3 minutes. I have an alarm that'll go off. Wrap up your last thought for a few more seconds and then move on to the next person. So, anybody in this front row that would like to speak?
I guess I get to follow that. Well, thanks for allowing us to speak. My name is Bill Crook. I am the president of the Oxford Lakes Association. I live at 725 Lakes Edge Drive in Oxford, 48371. There's a number of concerns that we have addressed. The board itself, our board, met 2 nights ago, and we're 100% against this whole PUD. For all the 5 voting members of the board. I think we do represent our community fairly well. It sounded to me like a lot of what they were talking about was encompassing threats. I mean, they were talking about how we could just have 207 homes instead of doing what we're doing now, underneath the way it sits. That doesn't sit well with me. I think most of the people here would add to that. What I want to know too is, as I mentioned a while back, we spend about $30,000, our subdivision, Oxford Lakes, spends about $30,000 a year on maintaining our lakes. And, they're gonna own about 1/3 of Ploss Lake, so or they do own about 1/3 of Ploss Lake. I wanna know what these new homes coming in there, what are they gonna do to help with that? Are they gonna have an HOA of their own? So I'm, basically, I wanna raise questions that I'm hoping that you folks can get answers to. They've got a lot of wetlands along that side of Ploss Lake, and I wanna know what they're gonna be doing with that. I mean, are they gonna be trying to destroy that, or maintain it, or, I mean, you know how it works, if you just add your, True Green Kinlawn comes out and they add their chemicals to the lawn and it washes down into the lake, what's gonna happen to our lakes? Because we maintain these. The biggest concern I have is not the traffic in that subdivision, or even coming out of that subdivision as much, as it is about 24 and Drainer. You're gonna be adding an awful lot of cars right into that intersection. I almost was hit there yesterday. So as you're coming out of the subdivision and headed that way, it's pretty high speed limits coming into that from the north and the south. And there's too many accidents, near fatal accidents. I think it's one of the worst ones in Oakland County. I'm also concerned, obviously, about the property values, what this is gonna do to us if they do this incorrectly, if they do the things. And it seems to me that this is, from what you guys have been saying, it's pretty much a negotiation at this point, because they're trying to change things with this PUD. So what's going to benefit the community and the surrounding subdivisions? Because we're adding so many new areas. They mentioned that there's gonna be 30% of open, is that my 3 minutes already?
Extra 3 minutes. Go ahead and finish your last point.
Well, at one point in time, they talked about 207 homes. I wanna know what's gonna be the average costs of these homes. I realize it's 104 multifamily units and 60 of the single-family units. So what is the average sale price gonna be? And I guess you want me out of there.
Thank you.
Hey.
I'm next. You can have my 3 minutes. You wanna finish? Go ahead.
Can I do that?
No,
No?
one person speaks. Was anybody else in that first row?
All right,
Okay.
I'm Kathy Hafley, and my husband and I have bought 534 Bay Point Drive 5 years ago to retire in. We are empty nesters. And my first, thank you gentlemen for all you do. And I'm first telling you that our neighborhood is plagued with people cutting through and not using stop signs and cutting through to avoid downtown traffic and get to Lakeville Road. And now we're gonna have more traffic. Number two, if you put in a duplex, that's a minimum of 4 cars. If you put in a triplex, that's a minimum of 6 cars. Now they're making these nice houses bigger, so they've got teenagers too. So that's a lot of more traffic instead of a single family home. Number 3, 2, 3, okay, number 4. Can they forget about the entrance on Oxford Lake Drive and just use the one on Drainer, and then we won't have all that traffic going down there? Number 5, can they, if they do get that exit, can there be a no right turn sign out so they get a ticket if they turn right and go towards our neighborhood? There's no reason for them to go that way. They don't live there. Our neighborhood has had to pay for guards at our lake so that people who don't live in our neighborhood aren't using our lake and acting inappropriately. Okay, I'm trying to get through here. Number 7. They mentioned a buffer, and first I heard 60 feet, and we've decided that this is about 50 or 60 feet. I first thought the buffer on Oxford Lake Road was 50 or 60 feet from the property line. Now I think I understand it's only 20 feet of buffer, and then it's 60 feet from the home. So it's gonna really change the look of driving down that street and seeing woods. I would like to propose that they skip putting all these houses in and leaving that buffer there if they do get approved. You skip this whole area so that it doesn't ruin the look of that street. I think that's it. I don't know. And I thank you for all your time studying this, and I'm very impressed with your questions. Thank you.
And again, just to reiterate, you know, we've talked about the wetlands, the traffic, property values. Please, whatever it's adding to this list, not repeating this list.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Beth Akers. I'm at 95 Pineview Court in Oxford Lakes, 48371. One question is, and I don't know if you guys can answer this or even take it into the equation, but we are on the Oxford water system, right? Oxford Water and Sewer. The water system itself, the water that coming into the houses, is like okay. It, you know, could use a little bit more softening. It could, you know, it needs an upgrade, right? But now we're gonna, obviously, I'm assuming we're adding this new subdivision to that water system, or is anybody even aware of that?
So,
But you can't really
that's
answer
something
any
we'll
of
have
those
to look
questions?
into.
Okay, so my question is, it's because, right now, a lot of the people in the Oxford Lake sub have to, add softeners to their homes as well as, filters to filter the water. So my question is, if we're going to continue to extend that kind of thing, would it just be cheaper to tap into Detroit city water since it's kind of right down there on Lookview Road? Would it be cheaper or smarter to do that? So that's like my question for that, and that's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again, Evelyn Archer, 750 Lakes Edge Drive. I would submit that Oxford officials owe great consideration to the quality of life of the established neighborhood impacted by this PUD. We live in a beautiful location, and we moved here to escape concrete and to see blue lakes and trees, animals, and nature. We didn't move here to experience hyperdevelopment throughout the township, and we don't know does Oxford really want to be known as a totally developed environment? Do we want to be known as Marijuana Row? We didn't move to this serene atmosphere for a homogenized atmosphere with Taco Bells and pot shops. We didn't move here to be like Sterling Heights, Farmington Hills, Royal Oak. We moved here for relaxed boating and not for more concrete and resultant runoff of drainage in the lakes. Our property taxes are high, and now we know they're increasing substantially soon in the township and village. So individual issues. I'm concerned about the proposal for a detention basin in the southwest portion of the site that will outlet to an existing ditch on the north side of East Drainer Road. So it'll be a stormwater outlet, and that corner is already overloaded. I mean, it's always wet and slippery. It's dangerous for a pedestrian, and future accidents, busy roadway, you know, there's opportunity for accidents there. I would ask that we have periodic discussions between your body, us, the public, the township, the village, recommendation agencies, and the developer to iron out specific issues, concessions, if you will, before, during, and after construction. We talked about traffic. sewer lines. I'm concerned that the clause that says sewer lines will be capped for the possible future development. Possible future development, I mean, that scares me. Maybe the developer needs to resurface East Drainer for a longer distance than now proposed, going east and west to Drainer at the developer's expense. We talked about greenery buffers and with mature trees and shrubs which block, not just diminish, but block sight, especially headlights, sound, vehicles, especially trash haul trucks, music, barking dogs, and smell, especially barbecue and marijuana. All at developer owner expense. I could go on. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name's Kathy Denemy. I live at 927 Abingdon in Oxford Lakes, 48371. I just had a few pointers. I concur with Bill about possibly putting in some guardrails, and what I mean by that, some protections into whatever modifications you decide on for this plan, because it sounds like it's already in the works. Just to make sure that once it gets approval, which if it does, that they can't change it negatively. I'm concerned about the traffic, as Kathy had mentioned, entering into Oxford Lakes, because we've had to deal with it since the M24 construction, thoroughfare north and south, and we're still dealing with it, unfortunately. I'm also concerned with the wildlife, the habitats. And one thing that I thought about was, since they do abut Floss Lake, if they do start developing this, how will that affect the underground feeding system to the lakes that we have in our subdivision, such as Oxford Lake, Floss Lake, the surrounding lakes? Will that cause any disruption, in the water table, possible flooding, or drainage of current structures at current lakes? So that's kind of my concerns. I'm sure you're looking into that, and I'd appreciate if you would. I just want to make sure that you continue. I appreciate your responsibility, and just remember that, like Joni Mitchell said, once you destroy paradise, you can't go backwards. So just please be careful in whatever you decide. Thank you.
I'm Glenn Denemy, same address as Kathy. I'd like to concur up with the statement about the traffic and say, again, I would like to add to that, I walk almost an hour every day, and I'm walking up and down Oxford Lake Drive, back and forth and around the subdivision. There are certain times of the day the traffic is so bad coming up and down that road, and they're speeding at least 40 and 50 miles an hour. I've been passed in my car driving 25 miles an hour 3 times since the 1st of January. Something has to be done. Somebody's going to get hurt. It's terrible, and it has been since M24 was rerouted down Glassby. Everybody decided, oh, we can get through this subdivision. They haven't changed their patterns. Anybody wants to go downtown, anybody wants to go east on Lakeville, they're all coming through there. So this is just going to make it worse, especially with that drive, the map's gone, coming straight out of that right into Glassby. People are just going to make right turns and go, because that way they don't have to wait for the light down there. And we'll probably need a light at the end of our sub when all that traffic gets added. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeff Cioma. I live at 500 Lakeside Drive, resident there. I guess my biggest concern is the construction. I didn't really look at it that tight, but I didn't see anything about construction entrances. If they were to put one there, off Lakeside Drive, it'd be a disaster. We've already got the gravel pit over there gearing up. There's gonna be a lot more truck traffic coming through there with Dan's excavating. And then you're gonna add this other development in there. It's gonna be virtually impossible for us to get in and out of our neighborhood. There's already a big problem at certain times of the day, and then we talked about traffic, but turning off, onto 24 off of Drainer to head south. There's only one lane there to make that left turn. It's a very short light, and basically you could be sitting there 3, 4, 5 lights waiting to make that turn. In the other direction, they have 2 turn lanes, so if you decide this development, that's something that maybe need to be put in place. The other thing is, schools, I know they're trying to justify their means, get more students, but we've already got an issue with traffic coming through there in the morning, in the afternoon, people dropping their kids off down at the end of Lakes Edge Drive. And it's ridiculous. These people drive, 30, 40 miles an hour through there. It's just a constant flow. Sometimes you can't even walk across the street. Now, if you add another 160, 170 units with more kids coming that way, they're all gonna come that way to drop their kids off for junior high. It's just a concern I have. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marguerite Little at 422 Thornhill Trail, and my concern is, my career was 38 years on a legal staff that dealt in product liability, so I'm concerned about the Oakland County Road Commission, the amount of density of traffic from Drainer all the way down to Bar Road. Just paving it won't solve it. It has to have a bridge to straighten out the road, guardrails. Tullamore only has one entrance and there's more than 30 houses there. And I concur with what everybody else has said about the traffic, and all their other statements are correct. The Oakland County Road Commission in Oxford could be sued for any fatalities, any accidents that involve paraplegic, any major accidents, injuries. If the road is not properly elevated, correct, they can be sued. It's just not right. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And again, just to remind, adding to the list, we've heard the traffic, add to the list, please.
I'm Mark Stone at 464 Sunset Boulevard, and I thank you all of you for your work. I especially appreciate, Donald, your comments and your pointed questions. I moved here to Oxford 3 years ago from Keego Harbor, a community where everything is just right on top of one another because of exactly what you said, the natural resources we enjoy here, the rural character of this community, and my kids have thrived here. And I think it's disingenuous for the developer to pretend that a development of this magnitude is somehow going to protect high-quality wetlands and woodlands. My 12-year-old would have liked to have been here tonight, but I told her she needed to get some sleep for school, and I would just read a statement from Ellery Stone. Maybe we can learn a little bit from a kid. This current generation of adults got to enjoy the nature and woods when they were kids. Now they're just going to build new houses now that in the past they have enjoyed the amazing nature. If this keeps on going, the next generation of kids will not get to enjoy this and will have to live in concrete jungles instead of real ones. Me and my brother are 12 and 6, and we know it would be wrong to cut down all of those trees. So I encourage you guys to protect the wetlands in a way that's real and not by jamming another development. In terms of the safety, I'm very disappointed that the developer has not done an actual road study, admitted here that he did not have an engineer doing that, and even admitted that there was no practical way to extend the safety path. His words. How can we put this development in when he himself is saying there is no practical way to extend the safety path? Isn't the safety path important for our community, for our kids? There are major accidents on the corner of Drainer and 24 every single week. We all know that because every time I'm coming back from my job at Oakland University, I get backed up in the traffic there. And I see, it's terrible. So we have to fix that. We have to think about traffic flows. We have to think about safety. And we have to protect our natural resources. I'm counting on you guys to do the right thing. And thank you all for your work.
My name is Evan Sioma. I live at 647 Thornhill Trail, Oxford, Michigan, 48371. I concur with everything everyone else has said. I think one of the most important things is the ecological impacts. Like many people have said, we enjoy the rural setting. We enjoy the forest, the wetlands, and the lakes. Oops, back out. I get some extra time. I thought it was interesting that they were saying that they were conserving all this space, but then they kept asking for waivers to extend the space, multiple waivers. And to the point that was made regarding the PUD, it's an ordinance. It's there for a reason. And I haven't heard any real benefits to the community from this development at all. Aside from fixing the blighted mine area that has had all its resources stripped. Whenever I drive past that area, it does not look like a stripped, blighted area at all. It looks beautiful and well kept. By putting houses right there with 20 feet of space between them and the road is just going to be an eyesore. I'm not completely against developing new homes, but I think to the point that we need larger lots to keep that rural setting is important.
Right, right.
Hi, I'm Jan Picentini. I live at 475 Lakesedge Drive. I have a couple of questions regarding what they said about the development, that these houses are going to be all ranch, but then they're talking about the second story. So wouldn't that be a colonial? I mean, it's kind of, to me, two different things. A ranch is one level, but then they're saying, well, you can get a second level. So it's kind of confusing. The 50 feet road instead of the 60, which they want to do, is that going to be parking on one side of the road so the fire trucks and all that stuff can get down there if there's an emergency? You start having the road getting smaller, you got people parking on both sides. I used to live on a cul-de-sac, and we had neighbors that would park on both sides. You couldn't get a fire truck down our cul-de-sac where I lived before, and there was somebody that needed to have an ambulance, and they had a fire in the house. They couldn't get down the street. They had to go find where the people parked their cars there to move them. So that's my concern, a safety concern, and if it's gonna be parking on one side, who's gonna oversee it to make sure that that happens? Is there gonna be tickets issued or what? That's my concern.
My name's Gary Ledger. I live at 520 Lakesedge Drive, and I also concur with everybody about the traffic, but what I want to offer is I would like to be able to take those signs. Most of us over here couldn't see what they're proposing, and the architect, if he wants to talk about each individual home so we could actually see the homes, they put it here, this is in the way, we couldn't even see what they're talking about building. Can I do that?
At the end, we can probably put those down, you can take a look at it, but just,
Thank
yeah.
you.
I'm Tim Ballwinder. I live at 460 Lakesedge Drive.
I've been in the Oxford Lakes for 46 years. And I asked you the question last time, you said you'd have the answer today about the 60-foot drive coming out of, onto Oxford Drive. They just take that? That's our property. Oxford Lakes owns 10 to 20 feet on both sides of Oxford Drive. We maintain it, we planted the trees, they cut every week, they pick up the papers.
We'll get into that when the consultants do their report.
Well, and they're planning on chopping down our trees?
Again, we'll get into that when they do the report.
When he does the report. I thought he did the report. Okay.
Hi, like a few other people have said, thank you all for all the work you do. My name is Mark Cleland. I live at 470 Lakeside Drive. And I think what Mr. Lozoldak or Donald, I'll say, they'll probably slaughter your last name. To me, that's the key. I mean, I guess you're talking about the long-term plan for Oxford. I guess there's one in place now. And I think there's been talk about revising the long-term plan, because I know we got something in our subdivision about providing input to it. So I guess, you know, if this doesn't meet the long-term plan, then I guess I'm not sure, you know, why we're even considering it. So again, I don't know enough of the details, but to me, if it doesn't meet the long-term plan, then it seems like we shouldn't be doing this. Thank you.
So it looks like we're good on this side. Anybody on this side had anything to add that's new?
My name is Roy Killard. I'm from 835 Woodley Way. I gave some papers. I don't know if you were able to accept them or not. They were my points, my talking points. Okay. I probably won't go with this completely because I got some other things which we picked up from the audience and from their presentation. Okay. As far as Oxford Lake Drive goes with the trees there, the trees start at the same basic level as the street, you know, above the curb. They go back a ways and then there is a steep drop off, at least 20-foot drop off. So you were talking about putting a path in there. I don't see how it could possibly ever be done. That area along Oxford Lake Drive that is to the west, or excuse me, to the east, that is a pancake area where they used to do the gravel pits. It's not that deep. It's about 20 foot, 30 foot down. Now, if they plan on putting the houses there, they're going to have to lift that up, that 20, 30 feet. That changes the whole landscape of that area. And when you get over to the edges of the lakes, like Ploss Lake and the other lake farther to the east, there is also a large cliff there. You have to climb. I had to crawl up that area. It's about 20 foot up, so I could get to see down where the lake was and the wetlands. So what are they going to do with that? They're going to rip it all down? They're going to build the area up? Also, I have a picture here that I took with my drone today. It shows the tree density that's on the east end of the property. About half of that property is full of these trees. Some of those trees are so big, I had one that was 5 foot diameter, at least. And other trees around there were approximately, 2 foot to that 5 foot. Some smaller ones, of course. But it was very highly populated, as you can see here. It's very dense. You don't see much green yet.
Can you stay at the podium so that they can pick up?
Okay. You don't see much green yet because it's still spring. Okay. Here's this 5 foot tree I told you about. I have my dog in front of it. You can see how large it is. That's down in that area. Okay.
That's your 3 minutes. Do you got one more point to make, or?
Can I hear?
That's the 3 minutes. Do you have another point to make real quick?
Okay. Let me double check. Okay. Well, my main objective here is to deny this PUD and to have either Oxford Village or the Township purchase that property and make trails and pleasure sites, picnic areas for residents of the whole township, just like you have over in the north end of the township and the far western side. We have nothing over here. This would be great for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, it's zoned R1A. Or excuse me, yes, zone R1A, and this density is too high for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You can read it.
Hi, my name is James Schultz. I live at 240 Signet Circle. I lived in Oxford for most of my life. I was born around here, went to all the schools, graduated. My concern is the image of Oxford. Growing up, when I tell people where I live, they go, "What's that? Where is Oxford?" Is this like nice, boonies, as people call it? And my main concern is, if we allow this, neighborhood to happen, and another one, we're gonna turn to Sterling Heights, Utica, Concrete Plaza, and I don't know how to navigate that. I work on Gillespie, and getting off there, prime rush time to do my usual stuff with Jim, go home, it's a nightmare. And I concur with everybody else with the traffic stuff. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Justin Sosha. I live at 227 Oxford Lake Drive. Concur with everything so far. Last time we met here, somebody had mentioned something about a potential petition or getting a petition together to see about, voicing everybody's opinion. I believe someone up there mentioned that you would have to have so many votes or something to actually, the only way to do it would be able to get it on a ballot. Is that correct? Does it sound about right? I know we have a lawyer here tonight, so. That was what was said back to us, that you'd have to get it on a ballot to vote on. Is there any validity to that?
We can talk, I'll let Brittany talk about that when she goes through her stuff later.
Okay, well, we put a petition together, and it was just within Oxford Lake Community subdivision. And, had it branched out, I'm sure we would have seen a bigger response, but I do actually have it here. There's over like 193 people that voted on it. We had only 1 for, so that kind of just shows like a small amount of people that are, against the development coming up. I would be curious to know what the validity to that is, if that is a possibility. How many signatures would we need Oxford Township in order to get it on a proposed ballot or something to vote it down, and just be done with it? So, thank you.
Evening, gentlemen. My name is James Deutsch. I live at 1288 Shepherd's Lane in Oxford. outside of the Oxford Lake subdivision, but also down Drainer. A couple of points. First of all, changing the slope line for safety of that steep drop off is only relevant because they want to put houses against it. So you're not removing a hazard, you're creating a hazard, then giving yourself credit for resolving that hazard. They claim that it's only developing about 23% of the property. Over 50% of that property is water or wetlands, so that number is deceiving. They're developing 23% of the total, but of usable land. As somebody said a little bit earlier about the gravel pit and the land is a far better thing for the community than a neighborhood. Basically the beautiful setting that it provides and the opportunity for fishing and kayaking. The Eagle approval, as I mentioned, is over 20 years old, so I would strongly urge that that is revisited with Eagle, and those approvals are revisited and not using something that's 20 years old, as a lot of things have probably changed. 18 acres of developed open space. What does developed even mean? One tree for every 3,000 square feet is kind of ridiculous to say I'm going to cut down 100 trees and plant one in its place. Point of clarification, a 50-foot road right away instead of 60 only allows the houses to be moved in by 5 feet on each side, only preserving an extra 10 feet, not 20. And the developer said that the site was stripped of its resources from the gravel pits, which is quite ironic to sit there and say and ask to come and strip it even further. And conveniently, the areas that they wanted developed conveniently were deemed as poor woodlands. I'm not sure how you determine poor versus good woodlands, but of course the ones that they want to develop on are poor. So the fact that this many people have shown up tonight to voice their concerns and their opposition should speak volumes, especially since this is the second time, as the last time there was a cancellation at short notice. So I think the fact that people are willing to dedicate this much time in opposition and voice their concerns should be taken quite seriously. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Ed Turowski. I live at 30 Spring Lake Drive, Oxford, 48371. I think the gentleman in the first row in the blue suit did a fine job trying to sell. He's doing this for our community, he's doing that for our community, and when I read between the lines, every one of these modifications that they're asking for, 50-foot road versus 60, no boulevard in the entrance, smaller entrance, no landscaping on the entrance, less setbacks on the back end of the houses that border Oxford Lakes Drive. This all translates into strictly dollars and cents, okay? Strictly dollars and cents. It costs a lot less to build a 50-foot road. They're getting the houses closer to the road. That means less driveways, concrete, less water, sewer, utilities. You know, you're paying by the linear foot when you're doing these things. And they're condensing the property. They're saying how, you know, they put on their program on that piece of paper I saw with the layout, some kind of gathering place. Robert mentioned that earlier in the northeast corner. Well, if he doesn't think he can do it, why is he showing it on there? What else are they putting on there that they're not going to do? I don't know. I'm very, very frustrated by the whole thing. Somebody up there also mentioned, I think it was Robert again, about a second entrance off of Drainer Road that would be paved. Well, if you put 2 entrances off Drainer Road to service that area and allow emergency vehicles, because you said there were people in the east quadrant would be trapped, then you don't need the entrance off of Oxford Lake Drive. And you know, from what I've been told from the builders of our subdivision, Oxford Lakes Association owns that strip. I don't know if the township has the ability to do eminent domain and just take it from us. We have been maintaining it for 40 years. 40 years of grass cutting, picking up trash. We pay a lot of money for that. If you're just going to take it from us, that means you guys say you own it, and the township owes us a boatload of cash for maintaining it for the last 40 years, plus interest. That may sound minuscule to you, but these are all real points that need to be considered. All they're trying to do, the density structure, duplexes, triplexes. I've seen these buildings in many, many communities, and they look great. That's a beautiful picture of a home. 20 years from now, when a duplex or a triplex needs a new roof, where do you stop and start with the roof? I've seen it in many communities where the guy just does his roof, and then you got a rainbow effect going on because the other two people can't afford to replace their roof.
Hello, my name is Michelle Bolden, and I live at 1359 Glass Lake Circle in Waterstone. I just wanted a clarification on if there had been any on-site evaluation of the wetlands area. In the preliminary site review plan, it says that minus the established lakes, the site contains minimal wetland areas aside from 2 small areas that will be filled. And according to all the viewers I could find online, the EGLE, the Oakland County Natural Resources, the Michigan Natural Features Inventory, they all suggest that the land between the lakes could be a wetland. So I don't know how they could determine that there isn't wetland areas. I just wanted clarification if there's been any on-site evaluation of that, and if they can just build a road through it if it's deemed a wetland.
Hi, my name is Drew Lance. I live at 385 Lakeside Drive in Oxford. I'm a builder by trade, so I have a few concerns about this. I'm hoping that these developers are held to do soil testing just not on the whole parcel, but on each individual plot of land where a house is. That's something that I have to do. But I do concur with a lot of the traffic issues that are in our neighborhood. The other thing I want to talk about is the zoning for this. The definition of an R1A is a single-family resident district intended to provide low-density detached one-family dwellings. Some of the other things I'm concerned about is making sure that this developer does tree surveying. I'm concerned about the Oakland County Drain Commission being involved. And then as far as like a environmental standpoint of this, it kind of seems a little silly, but I live right on Ploss Lake. Ploss Lake is not a gravel quarry. It's one of the only natural lakes in Oakland County and not in Oxford. As far as the animals that we have, I actually had to look this one up. There's a bufflehead ducks that come to our lake. They're not on the other lakes around us. Buffleheads are really rare. They are a bird of habit with a regular migratory pattern, and they spend their winters and springs in wooded inland lakes in the Great Lakes region. And I just think it's ironic that they call it a poor quality woodland area across from me. So thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing us to come and speak to you. I'm Tom Boudel. I live at 35 Lakes Edge Court. I live on Ploss Lake. Lived there 30 years now. I'm a little concerned about the density. We have the Oxford Hills Golf Course that recently is sold, and that could be developed, and you people will all be involved with that. Then we have the property just east of the golf course that I believe the developer has developed. Then we have Crossroad property that used to house the youth in Oakland County, and that's being developed. And then we have the portion across the lake from me. and I'm just concerned about that, and I concur with all the studies. I would hope that they would do a good traffic study and a good environmental study. Thank you.
I'm Paul Broder, 495 East Drainer. I have two concerns that haven't been brought up. One would be the dock and boating rights on the lakes. There's such a thing as keyholing, where several people can go onto one set of docks. I know you're not the DNR, but somebody needs to make sure that things like that aren't going to happen. The other issue is they're already dumping dirt in the low areas in there, in that area. And I don't know if it's in wetlands or in justifiable places, but I see trucks in there every day lately, the last few weeks. That's all.
Kathy Wally, 42 Spring Lake Drive, Oxford, Michigan. My concern is with the Oxford Township Planning Board, and some of the things that were said, I think you addressed it. It shall be done, not may be done, shall be done, okay? They're asking for waivers and, forget about this and that. If your plan for the direction of the village or for the township says it shall be done, how can you just change it? Does that not have to come before a vote before the people of Oxford? That's my question to you. When that word shall went in there, that changes the whole dynamic of the whole paragraph of that thing. Thank you.
Richard Bastian, 490 Lakes Edge Drive, Oxford. I concur with all that's been said. I'm, I guess, one of the last few to speak here, so there's not much more to add. However, whether there is a development or not that's done there, I think that we should give serious consideration to the intersection. Many people have talked about it, but one thing I want to add is not so much, it would be useful to have additional lanes, but I think that one thing that needs to be addressed is the grade. Because right now it goes up and it climbs pretty steeply right where you stop. So usually the very first car gets to go across the light when it's snowing or the roads are slippery. So the first car gets to go, and then the other cars miss their light, and it can get backed up with just the people that live there today. Now we're building additional developments, and I think it will get much worse. So that's one thing I wanted to add. The other thing I wanted to add is if they take the water from our division, my understanding is that we're using the pump station that is on, I forget which lake, but it's
Round Lake.
Which one?
Round Lake.
I think, yeah, it might be Round Lake, yes. And I think that this lake is already extended beyond, I think, what it can supply, so that would only add to it. Then the other thing I would like to add is that we have this zoning, which is R1A, from what I understand, and it looks like they're going to be packing a lot of houses in there, and then they're going with different types of duplex, triplex, and my concern is that they won't have the green spaces, or there doesn't seem to be plans for having a lot of spaces, and we have a lot of spaces in our development that we maintain. I think we pay something like $40,000-$50,000 a year just to cut the grass. This is how many spaces we have, green paths and parks and so on. My concern is that they will be utilizing that, and we won't really be able to police it. So we're gonna be paying for it, but we're gonna have all this extra traffic of people using it. So one thing I would like us to consider, my first choice would be not to have this, but if we do have it, I would like us to consider much lower density, and I would like them to respect our association rules such that potentially they could be part of our association and contribute to maintaining our association. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have anything to add new?
Yes.
Charlie Stevens, 625 Lakes Edge Drive, Oxford, Michigan, 48371. First off, I do agree with almost all the points that have previously been made. I do think that the developer kind of started in a little heavy-handed, making threats that if you don't approve this, then we'll put in 207 homes. I do agree with traffic. I do agree with, I didn't hear any plan today regarding water or sewer. I didn't hear, I did hear some, there was a lot of concerns regarding the effects on the environment, schools and parks. The smaller road, I do agree that that should be a safety concern, and I would like to see the fire department chime in on that in terms of fire truck access and ability to maneuver through emergency vehicles. It's interesting that if you don't agree for the lower setbacks, then they can put in 207 homes. This seems contrary to, well, if I'm giving you more space to put in homes, how can I put in more homes if you don't give me the reduced setbacks? The other thing I'd like, if possible, for your planner to explain how many of the lots are actually, how much of that 140 acres is actual buildable property. Again, a lot of the wetlands, in order to, whether, are we talking about doing landfills and so forth in order to make them buildable lots? I do agree with the density concerns. How many, I also like to hear from the planner in terms of how many homes, we heard the developer said he could put in 107. I wonder how many are your consultant would say are actually able to be put into that area. And and the only other thing I did also hear in the beginning, they say that you have three options. One would be to vote to approve, one would be vote to disapprove, and one would be to table it to some later date. There's a lot of new information that was provided tonight, and I don't know that everybody's had a chance to fully review all of that or get all the sink into our noodles. So I would encourage the board at minimum to give more time so that all of these issues and things that have been discussed can be further vetted. Thank you.
Lee Weiss, 236 Oxford Lake Drive. Thank you for allowing everybody to speak tonight. I think everybody made some great points, and I concur with all of most of them. Just give it your best attention to make sure that this is what's best for our community, because it doesn't feel like it, but sometimes decisions like this can be emotional. So I hope that everything is taken into consideration and you do what's best for our community. Thank you.
Is everybody that wanted to speak.
You said we could come back up?
I wanna make sure everybody that wants the first time has had their chance. Okay, yeah, you can come up now.
Just a couple of quick points. Once again, Bill Crook, 75 Lakes Edge Drive. My wife has made a point that she wants to know about what's going to happen if they're going to be leveling a lot of that land. So those trees and that wetland's going to have to come out of there in order to put these roads in and so forth. So that buildable land is not really there for that purpose. You know, it's wetlands, and it's a nicer area that the gentleman said, and I would concur with that should be purchased by the township or the village and turned into a community area. And it could really be nice for something like that. And then I guess my last point would be, we've all been asking questions here. How do we get these answers? I mean, we've just been question after question after question to you folks, or them. And I want to know, where do we find out the answers to these questions that we've all been asking? How do we do that? Do you know?
Some of them will be addressed when we go through the reports.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Greetings again and again and again. Evelyn Archer, 750 Lakes Edge Drive. And to the point brought up about how do we get answers, that's why I was proposing periodic sit-downs or discussions between your body, the public, and those who make decisions. I would submit the Oxford Lake Association president or board as well, before, during, and after construction, as I said. And also one thing that piggybacks a little bit onto the use of the lakes, whether Ploss Lake now is boatable or not. Perhaps if this goes through and there are new bylaws of this PUD, Bill mentioned no weed sprays near the lakes. And if it's a boating lake, one would hope it would be a quiet lake with no gas-powered engines and no for-profit boat launches to be developed, and to discuss with a developer to fund a budget for health of the impacted lakes. Thank you.
Kathy Hafley, 534 Bay Point Drive. So the developer boasted about how many acres that weren't being developed. It looks to me like the only thing not being developed is Lake Erin. Thank you.
All right, so with that, we will take a motion to close the public portion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing at 9:18.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. All right, so we are gonna move to comments and reports from the township consultants. Who wants to go first?
They gotta talk to them.
Good evening, Megan Massiminock again. I'll go through my review with you and hit some of the highlights that I feel that are relevant to your decision tonight. I know that you all took the time to read it. But before I start, I want to address some things that came through the public hearing, if I can, Mr. Chair. First of all, in terms of whether or not this is a possibility for this to be developed into single-family homes. While some of the public may have perceived that as a threat, it's a fact. It's zoned R1A. Those are 60-foot wide, 6,000 square feet lots that are allowed. If any property owner bought you a site plan that complies with all the zoning as a site plan, not a PUD, you would have to approve it if it met all the rules, because it's an administrative function by the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. In terms of the amount of developable land on the property, it's about 50% due to the lakes and the associated wetlands. Unfortunately, we can't really give you an exact amount, and I'm sure the township engineer can speak to more of that, because who controls whether people can build within a wetland is not the township, it's Eagle, and they issue permits. There's 2 small wetlands over which some houses are proposed and roadways are proposed to go. And in our experience, and I've been doing this for 20 years, I've seen many wetlands of that size that were not directly connected to a lake, getting a permit from Eagle. So we feel like that's realistic. However, also their parallel plan, where they showed the 173 single-family units, that was realistic in our opinion, and I believe in the engineer's opinion. I'll let him speak for himself, in terms of that's a possible layout to get that many houses on site complying with zoning. In terms of where the information about the wetlands comes from, the applicant submitted a wetland survey that was done by a registered environmental engineer. And so people were on site, tagged plants, looked at the hydrology and whatnot. And so that is accurate in terms of what is out there and comes from a licensed environmental engineer. This is a PUD, so it's an opportunity for a negotiation. You've heard many things from the public in terms of what they value about this land as its neighbors. I would say that, and I think we've specified some things in our report that we'll go through, that this would be an opportunity to negotiate with the developer to have preservation of natural features and elements, and also improvements that wouldn't be possible under a straight site plan. Under a straight site plan, they could take out, and you don't have a woodlands ordinance, so many of the woodlands protections that might be offered wouldn't necessarily be there. There's not an opportunity, we don't specify in the zoning ordinance that they have to have native species, that's not there. And then also there's an opportunity to ask them for, in a PUD, you can have off-site improvements. And there may be some opportunities to scale back some of the things that they're offering that are more investments to look to have road improvements. But that will be a negotiation between you and the developer. One of your roles tonight would be also to talk to the developer about what your priorities are, if you could consider approving this and under what circumstances. And any of those should relate to the standards for the PUD. And so I'm gonna dive more into my report. And I hope I've answered some of the public's questions. One question did come up in terms of water and sewer, and this is in the township water and sewer service boundary. They would be they're eligible to hook into those systems. Again, the site is zoned R1A. That is 60 feet, 6,000 square foot lots. Surrounding zoning to the north in the village of Oxford, it's R1 single family. Just for context, that zoning district in the village requires 60 feet, 7,200 square foot lots. So slightly bigger lots are required in that zoning district to the north. Also to the east, it's zoned quasi-public, and to the south zoned R1 recreation, and to the west zoned industrial in the village. If you look at the master plan, this site is zoned for, this site is planned to be village residential with 9,000 square feet. That's a little different than what they're proposing and what it's zoned. Again, the master plan is a guide, the zoning is the law. So at this point, by law, someone with property rights of this portion is that the smaller lots of 6,000 feet would be available. I know that's a discrepancy. I've also was asked a question in terms of why, is it warranted to look at the smaller lots when this is 9,000 square feet? And we had cited in our report proximity to the village. And the theory behind that proximity to the village is that the village should be the densest part in the Oxford community, and the density should step down going away. But also, the closer population is to the village, the more it can economically support that. Now, you've heard a lot of issues about traffic too, so those are also balancing decisions and factors that you should take into mind. I want to address a couple of things per the design standards that were talked about. The applicant is asking for a waiver from that 100 feet from the boundaries of the development. They've offered some information tonight about why they've done that, but I want to stress that a lot of the information that they provided verbally has not been shown on paper. So if we did not receive a forestry or an arborist report, we have no documentation about the health of the trees, the type of species, or their size. And so we were unable to evaluate that, whether the trees that were there are worth preserving, and our assumption in the beginning is that they are there, they are worth preserving, unless you can give us documentation that the tree is an invasive species, it's in poor health, or it's in some way going to have a negative effect by being there instead of, and that an existing tree is a better thing for the natural features instead of tearing it down and putting in a new tree. There can be circumstances where that is necessary. There may be steep slopes that are dangerous. There may be also that this is the only place where you can grade in order to put in utilities and whatnot. So there are a number of things, but in our opinion, the applicant didn't provide a lot of information as to why they were asking for that waiver. You may modify these design standards. So while those design standards are a shall, that 100 foot, the ordinance for the residential PUD outlines standards where you can modify those. And those are, 1, intent and purpose, that the modification is consistent with the intent and purpose of the residential planned unit developments as outlined in section 14.1. 2, higher quality. The residential planned development results in a higher quality development than otherwise permitted by that underlying zoning district. And 3, that modification is necessary to achieve a higher quality development. So specifically on that design modification of the 100 foot from 100 feet boundary, the challenge to you is to decide whether it meets those 3 standards. And then if it does, you may waive them. But if it doesn't, you are within your rights to say, no, we don't feel like that modification is something that we can do or that we would approve as part of this PUD. You could ask them to redesign, or you could ask them to redesign and to look at that further. And in our review, we wrote, without a commitment to preserve the trees in the woodlands and the required buffer areas, we felt that the proposed configuration does not meet those criteria. That said, if there was some information that was brought forward about the trees in those areas or the natural features that were there, and that there was documentation on paper that they would not be worth preserving or detrimental, I think that we could revisit that. In terms of natural resources on site, there is a lot of topography on site. The applicant has provided some information tonight about why they're proposing so much grading and whatnot. While that may be a good thing, and it could be a design thing that would add to the site and add also to the ecology of the site, what is on the site plan right now doesn't have any of the features that have been mentioned verbally in terms of plantings, prairie, bank restoration, anything of that where you would grade something to go into a wetland, but then also have landscaping and ecological restoration in order to contribute to and protect the health of that wetland. And there are a lot of wetlands on this site, and they are associated with lakes. I'm veering off a little from the letter, but I do want to stress also, what the applicant is proposing to do is to not have lots in the associated wetland areas with the lakes. And so there wouldn't be residential developments within those areas, which that may be possible under conventional development. So if a concern is about people putting fertilizer, true green, whatnot, on their backyard lot that goes into the wetland, with what they've proposed, there are no lots in terms of people's yards that are in the wetland. There may be one or two little edges, so there would be much less likely to have that runoff go in. There are also other things that they may be able to offer in terms of looking at how they take care of common areas, or maybe even rules in their homeowners association about what could be used near and around the lakes and the wetlands. Section 14.6H1 states that residential PUDs should be designed to promote the preservation of natural features such as mature woodlands, tree lines, steep slopes, wetlands, floodplains, stream corridors, protected plants, and animal habitats. We do recognize that a substantial amount of the lot will need to be cleared to accommodate construction. However, part of your job is to determine what measures would be appropriate to protect those adjacent lakes and the wetlands, as well as the preservation of the existing vegetation and woodlands, and how those should be prioritized. With the use of the PUD, the applicant could consider preservation of trees and existing vegetation to the greatest extent possible. And then in return, what the Planning Commission could do is to say, we will waive landscaping standards. So if a concern is the view shed coming down Oxford Lake Drive, there may not be a need for them to take down those trees and put in new landscaping, which if you look at the site plan now, that seems to be what they're proposing to do. However, you as the Planning Commission could tell them, we would much rather see you preserve those woodlands going down Oxford Drive rather than putting anything else in. And it's okay to preserve what it is, even if they are invasive species or whatnot. Or you could ask for more information about what those trees and what those woodlands are. In terms of access and circulation, there's been a lot of talk about the 50-foot versus the 60-foot. That's at the applicant's request. But in terms of the landscape boulevard at Drainer Road, we recommended waiving that requirement for the Oxford Lake Drive entrance. There's an 8-foot wide safety path running along East Drainer to the boulevard entrance. The Township Safety Path Ordinance requires them to install that safety path in lieu of construction. The Safety Path Committee would need to determine whether it would require a safety path to be extended. And they have given you reasons why they're asking for that waiver. They have proposed 3 5-foot mulch trails running in and out to viewing areas. We've recommended that signage should be considered for the area between detached units 2 and 3 delineating the development and the village property lines. They've also not stipulated whether they've contacted the school districts to determine a desirable pickup spots. I'm sorry to pause and flip, but a lot of these things have been already discussed that I'd highlighted. In terms of the traffic study that was provided, there were a number of items that we cited where we felt that traffic study was lacking. Specifically, it didn't account for the anticipated redevelopment of Oxford Hills Golf Course, and that it was unclear, they were saying 14 units, in the development to the south in Tullamore, but there's actually more there. So we feel like that traffic study could be improved. But no matter what, if you look at that traffic study, and I think you've had testimony here tonight that Lapeer Road and Drainer intersection is underperforming. Even if they put in some, and the RCOC is asking for different improvements, this is also a place where they could contribute to improvements on Drainer. But likely what it would have to be is that then something else that they're proposing, they might take something out like the pickleball courts or something else in order to contribute to that. But if you felt like that was a priority, that was something that you could share with them. In terms of landscaping, the Planning Commission can modify specific requirements as long as the adjustments keep within the intent of the ordinance. Those factors are topography, parking, and public benefit. The applicant stated that the existing vegetation in the upland portions of the site would be preserved, but the specific areas and the counts of trees or the types of vegetation haven't been provided. And we didn't feel that there's sufficient information regarding that open space calculations or the existing vegetation for the Planning Commission to consider that waiver. And we strongly recommend the preservation of existing trees and vegetation over clear cutting and new landscaping. Also, given the limits of available space and the current natural state of the area, we recommend the Planning Commission waive the requirement that the frontage along East Drainer Road, east of the single-family homes, be counted towards those frontage calculations. We agree with the applicant. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yes?
There are no trees.
Can we,
And there is no.
guys,
They wouldn't go
guys,
double the
guys,
Right.
thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. We just wanted to note also that we agree, we defer to the fire chief in terms of those maneuverability concerns in the cul-de-sac island, and the lack of the island, but therefore it not being landscaped. In terms of the residential standards, really, I think what you need to look at is that recognizable and substantial benefit. And how
Hang on a second. Guys, can you take that conversation out in the hallway, please? Because we're trying to listen to her and all we can hear is you. Thank you.
So the minimum common areas to be dedicated for open space and residential PUD is 25% of the net lot area. And sheet P3 provides open spaces calculation that states it's 30%. And they provide information on what type is being utilized. However, a portion of that space is titled developed upland open space, and due to the requirement that the open space must be protected from all forms of development, we were asking for more clarity on the applicant's intent for those areas dedicated for open space, especially those that are behind the attached units. The way that they're configured is almost that they could act as somebody who's living there could see that as their own backyard, rather than a common space that's supposed to be protected in some way. And so more clarification on those would be helpful. And I just want to clarify also for the public, the ordinance is very specific about what's open space and what's not. I'm not going to delve into that here, but when we're looking at those calculations, there's only a certain percentage of wetlands and lakes that can be taken into account. The other challenge is to look at that superior design, and I want to highlight two items where we disagreed with the applicant in terms of whether it's a superior design. First is the landscaping. Again, that PUD should be designed to preserve natural features, including mature woodlands, the tree lines, the steep slopes, and we don't feel that the landscaping as proposed with what's on the plan, which doesn't specify any species, meets that standard. And from what the applicant said verbally tonight, it doesn't match with what's on the landscape plan. And if there was more information going to that extent, we think that they could meet that standard. In terms of the public dedication, they said that they would dedicate the land at the southeast corner of the subject parcel. However, and they said that in a letter. However, that location is not shown on the site plan, and would need to be. Also, we would ask that that be evaluated by our landscape architect in terms of the dimensions to see how usable it was, and in what fashion the township could use it, either as a township-owned park or maybe it and whatnot, because the dimensions of those really matter, and especially if you're looking to have parking or whatnot. Some more detail is needed, in our opinion, in order to evaluate whether that it is truly a worthwhile public dedication. Also, in terms of architectural details, they do have varied types of facades. However, the predominant material used in the elevations for the attached units is vinyl siding, which is listed as an accent material, and the architectural details listed for superior design. We recommend that the area shown as vinyl shake siding be converted to a cedar shake or cementia siding, and that materials in the front elevations wrap entirely around both the single family and the attached units in order to meet that superior design standard. Also, per section 14.6K, garage doors should have a maximum width of 10 feet each. We didn't have a scale or dimension to look at, but we estimated using on a scale that the proposed doors are between 15 to 20 feet wide on all units. Again, you can weigh those design standards, but in terms of being a superior design standard, we didn't have enough information to see whether they even meet those minimums that are listed. In summary, you can grant approval with or without conditions. You could deny the application at this point, or you could postpone. And what we would ask, if you are looking to do any of those actions, is to link them to the standards. And if you're looking to postpone, to be very clear as to what you expect from the applicant in order for them to be able to come back to this body. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jim Sharp, Township Engineer. I'm gonna run through my letter and also try to address some of the comments that the residents had brought up at the same time. So in your package, you should have my letter dated March 11th. And I'm just gonna kind of run through that a little bit. Gonna hit the highlights. I'm not gonna hit them all. Item number 2 talks about the delineated wetlands. So again, it's been mentioned before about the wetlands on site and these easements that were recorded when the development previously happened 20 years ago. Since that time, they've had the site reflagged with a wetland consultant, Bar Engineering, and there's a letter in your packet from that dated February 26th. And at this point, they're working with Eagle to basically redelineate those wetlands, make sure that the ones that were previously shown on the plans are, and work through some things. There are going to be a couple of wetland crossings to get to the back area, but that's not uncommon. And again, as Megan had previously mentioned, the smaller pockets when they're not tied to other bodies of water and so forth is generally approved by Eagle as long as it's not a large wetland there. But we'll make sure that all that gets that's all on the up and up before before all the engineering plans and so forth are approved. Item number 3, again, just more approvals. Should this plan be approved, they're going to need their Eagle approvals, WRC, Road Commission, all the normal stuff that we have to go through. So there's many steps. Should this plan be approved? Let's see, grading plans. we'll talk about that just briefly again. It's been hit on, you know, as far as the grading of the site. They're not allowed, they would not be allowed to do any grading within a regulated wetland area. And the easement, they cannot grade within the buffer area, which is the 25-foot setback, unless a land improvement permit is granted from the township. So they can, in certain instances, they can go in there and apply for that permit, which generally is part of the site plan process, and do the grading in there and then restore it back. But they would never be allowed to go inside the wetland areas and do any grading within those areas. The sanitary sewer, it's part of our the township's east sanitary sewer district. It has no bearing on the village's capacity or anything like that. There's no interaction between the east district and the village system, so no issues with the sanitary sewer. The developer will be putting in his own sanitary sewer pump station that goes into a line that's on Drainer Road. Again, all part of the township system, not a part of the village there. We have capacity in that line, so no issues there. With regards to the water distribution, again, that comment was made by a resident. So the people are aware, Oxford Village has its own system, Oxford Township has its own system. There is no intermingling of the systems. We do have a couple of locations where we have emergency connections should one of us lose water and need water from the other community, but there is no intermingling of those systems. So as far as the hard water softening and things like that, that is something that the residents of the village would need to take up with their DPW and their council there. As far as Oxford Township, we will provide the water to this site, and we do have capacity to be able to service the developed number of homes within this development that are being built. So again, no issues with that. Number 8 just talks about the interior alignment of the system. Again, that's just looping of the systems, which we always encourage, and that will just loop to the township system. Number 9, I deferred to the Oxford Township Fire Department about comments on hydrant accessibility. I don't believe anybody here is from the fire department tonight, so I'm going to speak on their behalf. There was a letter in your packet, and I believe that the letter was dated, well, let's see, did I write that down or not? Fire access. 5/11, that's not right, is it? There's a letter in your packet, I'll tell you that. And they do not have any issues with the accessibility of the site. They are requiring that there be no parking signs posted on the hydrant side of the street, and that is stated in the letter. So just refresh that, and that was again a comment that was made from somebody in the audience earlier today. With regards to the stormwater drainage, they're proposing an enclosed stormwater drainage with catch basins, and they're going to collect it all into a system. They're going to discharge it to some of the wetlands, some of the lakes, and there is one detention pond up front. All of this would be handled in a manner that we do with all of our other developments, and it all has to be pre-treated before it enters any of the outlets, any of the waterways. These are being proposed as mechanical pretreatment devices. They're devices that go in line of the sewer, and the stormwater goes through there, it swirls around, all the sediment drops out, clean water goes out to the wetlands or to the stream or wherever it's going there. The HOA, there will be an HOA for this, we'll talk about that in a minute. They're responsible to go in and maintain those mechanical pretreatment devices periodically, suck them out with back trucks and things and as well as their catch basins and so forth. So all that gets collected to grease the oils and everything so that it prohibits it from going into the lakes. Stormwater detention calculations, they weren't provided, they're not required at this time, but everything looks like it can be engineered properly in accordance with our standards. 2 access points, that's been a topic of discussion many times here. They're proposing the boulevard entrance off of Drainer Road, and then we have the one that's on Glassby Street, the single entrance over there. The applicant needs to adhere to all the requirements of the road commission. At this point, there's been some dialogue going back and forth. I've seen some of the letters between the road commission and the applicant as to what's going to happen there. As far as the traffic issues, township doesn't own any roads. So, you know, although the traffic is a concern, I understand that. the road commission owns all of the roads in Oxford Township, unless it's a private road, which would be within the development. But Drainer Road, that's a jurisdiction of the road commission. M24, jurisdiction of MDOT. So if there's issues with the signals, changing the timing of the signals, widening of the roadways and so forth, that is really a discussion that needs to come up with the road commission and MDOT in order to make that happen. That is not, again, the township does not own any roads in the township. With regards to, let's see, what's my next one? Oh, we have the access drive too, I should mention that on Glassby there. So there's a spike strip that everybody's been talking about. There's a 7-foot wide spike strip, which is just, it's a landlocked piece of land, as Engineer Thompson had alluded to. Maybe it was put in there, so they couldn't put in driveways or something like that. If you look at the plat of, I believe it's called Maplewood Park, comes down there and it stops at the north end of it. It skips 60 feet and then it continues the rest of the way down Oxford Lakes Drive. So there is a 60-foot gap in there, and again, the intent, we all believe, was that so that a roadway could connect in there in the future. So whether it's been maintained for 20 years or 40 years, that little 60-foot piece in there, yeah, I think there's maybe a light pole or something right there as well. That would all have to be worked out, but I believe that that the applicant does have access to that roadway at that location there, according to the county maps and everything that has been provided to us for review. Excuse me. 20-foot wide emergency access, so in addition to the 2 access points, the general access point, we briefly spoke of the emergency access that would be on James Hunt Drive. They do have an easement for that already set up in place, so that's just an additional point because of the length of the roadway that goes back there, that the fire department could come in on James Hunt Drive and gain access to those homes in the back in a quicker way, is the bottom line. We're doing internal private roads. It's going to be asphalt pavement with concrete curb and gutter. And I would like to, again, specify the 50 versus 60 feet. So the roads themselves will be the same width. The road's going to be 27 feet wide, and it doesn't matter whether the right-of-way, which is the area where the road is, and then the utilities and the sidewalks and so forth, that doesn't matter whether it's 50 or 60. The road itself is going to be 27 feet wide. What the applicant is proposing to do is reduce the right-of-way from 60 feet to 50 feet so that they can move their buildings slightly closer. There are still going to need to be easements in there, so they're going to have their 27-foot wide road, and they're going to have, do the math in my head real quick, what was that, 16 and a half, or no, it's going to be 13 and a half on each, 13 and a half, I believe, additional on each side. But they're going to have storm sewer, they're going to have some water mains, they're going to have some sanitary sewer there, so they're also going to need easements in those areas. So even though the right-of-way is only going to be 50 feet wide in lieu of your typical 60 feet, which ordinance does allow for the 50, I think that with all the easements and stuff in place, you're really not going to notice any difference. And the roadway, again, the most important thing is that it's going to be the same width, whether it was a 50 or a 60-foot wide right-of-way. That's what we're talking about, not the road width, okay? For the pathways, the safety paths. So again, ordinance says that you have to put a safety path in where you abut a public roadway. Because of the spike strip, they do not abut Oxford Lakes Drive. So by ordinance, they are not required to put in a bike path there. So that would have to be something that the applicant would be willing to do, as I believe Mr. Knoll or somebody had, maybe suggested. But that is the reason why there is not a safety path along Oxford Lakes Drive, because they do not technically abut the roadway because of that spike strip. On Drainer Road, the reason for they're going to extend the safety path from Oxford Lakes Drive across their boulevard entrance, and then it's going to tie in on the east side of the entrance and go into their site. It's about 300 feet from their entrance to the first property, residential property, and then there's about 4 residential properties beyond that. We recently put in a water main through there, and we went through several negotiations with them just to get an easement for the water main easement. The safety path would be further back onto their property. One of the residents is here and spoke earlier, and I'm not gonna speak for him, but I do not, in our opinion, believe that those residents would be willing to give up even more land for a bike path in the future. Even if that were to occur, once you get to the east end of the easterly property, Tullamore Lake is right there, and it's a drop off like crazy. There's no way that you would be able to build continuing safety path on that side of the road. You would have to bring that safety path to the other side of the road, cross the gravel road at, you know, kind of where the current Tullamore development ends, and then go on the other side. So in our minds, the reasoning made sense to us as to why they wanted to stop that safety path at that particular location. But again, they are asking for a variance because ordinance does require it to go to the end of their property, but that was our reasoning behind it, so for your consideration. Let's see. We're doing 5-foot internal sidewalks throughout the development. The landscaping, I would defer to the planners on that. Megan spoke quite a bit on that. And we just look to make sure that it's not really in conflict with any of the utilities. You know, we don't want trees planted right over the top of our manholes and fire hydrants and so forth. And then this will, because of the type of development it's going to be, this will be a condominium. So there's gonna be master deed, there's gonna be bylaws, there's gonna be an HOA, there's gonna be all of that involved with this process as well. The township's process does not have them provide those documents until the time of final site plan approval. You don't have to do it at preliminary, so that's why that is not in your packet. There will also be a development agreement, which I would defer to Attorney Ellis on, and she's, you know, she would draft up the language along with the applicant to come up with the development agreement for this property, which would lock in a lot of the things that everybody's talking about here tonight. So, from an engineering perspective, we are confident that the design engineer can, you know, design this thing to make it work, in terms of the water, the sewer, the roads, and the bike paths and so forth. So, I would be happy to answer any questions. Let me see, let me just make sure I hit it. Village water and sewer, traffic, safety paths, fire department. Yeah, I think I hit everything that I needed to as I was going through there. So, are there any other questions for me?
On one of the earlier plans, the east side property line did not connect all the way through. There was some issues at the bottom, I think. Has that been resolved?
To my knowledge, it has not. To my knowledge, there was an issue with the plat actually for the Oxford Lake subdivision. And that there was a discrepancy of approximately 13 feet. Our review was done a couple months ago, because then they postponed at the last one, so we haven't seen new documents come in. The reviews were basically, they just stayed the same because they just came forward with it. But to my knowledge, maybe you could ask that of the applicant. But yes, there was a discrepancy that they were trying to work through, and again, I believe it actually had to do with the plat to the north, that there was some closure error on that from when it was done.
Troy, a couple questions. So there's a property line that, and I think this is appropriate for you to answer from an engineering perspective, but maybe it's Megan or someone else. The property line for the village cuts by lots 2 and 3 on the north part of that. Does that present problems with the development? It seems like those houses are really getting squeezed in there, and the development's intentionally trying to, on P 3.0, and there's a bunch of other drawings that has it on the P 3.0.
3.0 you're looking at?
Yeah, P 3.0.
Oh, nope, let me look at. Okay, so we're at 3.0 and
So this
again?
prop right here, where the village cuts in,
Yes,
lots 2 and 3.
yes.
So So the lots 1 and 2 have to have like signs in their backyard that say, don't cross this line? You're smiling, but I'm just curious, that seems odd, I don't know where that property line ends.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, they have to adhere to the setbacks for that, so as far as like a sign as to where that would be no different than two neighbors, you know, who plant some trees or something like that, and they just kind of agree to where it is, so, as far as like a trespass or something, I don't know if a sign would be necessary to go in there, or, you know, the owner of
Is there a
units
property
2
line
and
to show?
3,
Yeah, right, you're getting.
they
to
should
that,
know
right?
where their property lines are, basically, is what it is.
Who owns that? Do you have any idea?
Who owns what?
That little section that's the village property, is that, it must be,
That would probably be it'd be part of the plat for the Oxford Lakes development, and it's probably deemed as some open space or something like that would be my guess. That would probably be more of a question for the developer as.
so Oxford Lake could actually argue not to cross that line?
If it's not their property, they actually could, yeah.
Take note.
As on the north, up near Mud Lake, how the property goes way up on the north side there, the developer could argue for those residents not to cross their property line as well. By, I guess that's Pine View Court, if you see that, because their property, where Pine View Court is.
I'm not quite following you, but, there's so much to unpack here. This is,
Right, so the developer's property goes way to the north,
oh, I see.
way up to where those homeowners are along Lake's Edge and Pine View Court, so again, they could potentially do the same. I'm not getting in the middle of that, that's for attorneys to find out, so. Yeah,
So then there's this, walking path that goes through the, on the north side, you know, there's this path that walks along here, right?
sure.
And, you know, maybe this is more of an architectural thing, but I'm just picturing if I'm owning one of those lots and I'm out back enjoying my coffee in the morning and looking out at the nice lake and people are walking through my backyard. Seems kind of awkward, but.
Buyer beware, I guess.
It's a mulch path, and I just see that, you know, it's being proposed as a benefit to the development. But if it's mulch, how long is that really gonna last, and would a neighbor want to maintain that? You know,
Again, those are concerns that, you know,
HOA.
that could be done by, written into the development agreement, or,
Right.
something by the HOA themselves.
Well, when I look at it, it ties into the overall feeling of the development. Nice pictures and all these things, but sometimes it's not always what it looks like, and I'm trying to just
Yeah, it's kind of more
find
of
out where these.
more of a planning aspect, you know, for Megan and her team than it is
Okay.
engineering wise. No, I try to deflect, but engineers are kind of just straight in. Don't think outside the box out there. Anything else? Any other questions? That answer all the questions.
Thank you for clarifying. There's a lot of things that you did clarify that was very helpful, so.
Well, for you and for the residents, just so everybody understands
Definitely.
what's going on, and hopefully, you have any more questions? Right over here. Thanks. Okay. Please.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I will try to not touch too much on things the planner and engineer have already gone through as the hour is late. However, I will go through my review, and I will also make myself available for any of the legal questions. I know there were a few tonight, both from the public, and the commission may have some for me as well. My review mostly touched on the completeness of the application. I found that the application is substantially complete. Applicant submitted everything required under the zoning ordinance to obtain a conditional preliminary site plan approval. However, there are some items that will definitely need to be addressed between now, if they got approval tonight, and at the time they come back to request final site plan approval from this commission. Ooh, sorry guys, I'm tired. It's been a long night and day. So from that aspect, the application is substantially complete. I then go through, some of the procedural requirements for someone to obtain preliminary site plan approval and final site plan approval. There are some facts for this planning commission to find tonight. Those include that there is a recognizable and substantial benefit from the property or from the development. I just want to read that standard so everyone in the room is aware what standard this planning commission's operating from. The residential plan unit development must provide recognizable and substantial benefits, both to the end users of the development and the overall community, beyond what could otherwise be realized from conventional development using the standards of the underlying zoning district under this ordinance. Your planner kind of went through this. There are plans that can be submitted under a straight zoning that would allow this developer to develop this property without going through the PUD process that may be more dense, do not, provide a community benefit, those sort of things. So that is the standard under which this planning commission is reviewing, should be reviewing this development tonight. The other standards are unified control, which the developer has met. They have ownership or control of the area to be included in the residential PUD, such that there is a single person responsible for full completion of the project. That's also driven home if they obtain approval through their planned unit development agreement. Contiguous, all land to be included within a residential PUD shall be contiguous, this is met. And then superior design, residential PUD development shall provide at least 2 superior design elements as defined in section 14.8C, superior design, which that standard has been addressed by your planner in her review, so I won't go through that so much. I did address in my review the conservation easements on the property. If this commission decides to approve and move forward with conditional approval tonight, one of the conditions is that the developer provide in writing assurances basically to the township that they understand they're proceeding at their own risk. We make no representations as to whether Eagle will terminate or agree to move any of those easements. We know that they've been talking to Eagle, however, and we have some of that correspondence in our files. However, the township's not involved in that. We're not, making any guarantees to the developer tonight should preliminary approval be granted. Postponement, I know that the options for the planning commission were gone through pretty thoroughly by the planner. I just want to address that postponement can only be passed by the planning commission in certain circumstances. Those circumstances include if the application does not contain enough information to conduct a review, if additional information is necessary for the planning commission to make the determination, or significant changes are necessary to the site plan for the developer to obtain approval. So if the planning commission were to postpone tonight, they need to cite one of those 3 reasons to support that determination. So I think that's all I have. I know there was some questions about whether a PUD is a rezoning. In Oxford Township, it is not. Under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, townships are given the authority to do planned unit development approvals one of 2 ways. One is administratively through your planning commission's authority. The other way is through zoning amendment, which is actually, that authority rests with the Board of Trustees. The planning commission cannot give final approval for rezoning. Our zoning ordinance gives the planning commission administrative authority over planned unit development agreements. It's not a rezoning. It's not subject to petition, overturned by petition, in my opinion. So that's everything I have for you. And I'm available, of course, for any questions on other issues that may come up. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to number 6, review of correspondence. We do have talking points for township meeting regarding Drainer Road, PED.
Just acknowledge that it's been received and that we never accepted it.
Okay, so somebody wants to make a motion to accept?
Second.
I'll make a motion to accept the acknowledgement of Roy Gillard.
I'll second that.
Okay. And then I also have,
All those in favor? Oh, you have another one?
I have another one that came in via an email earlier, which was just some points basically, which I can read through if you want first. Or do you want to vote to accept it?
Why don't you cover the bases? I would suggest you cover the bases.
I'll just read this. It says, this is from Chad and Sarah Umshite, 311 Whispering Winds. The email says, we are writing this letter to voice our dissent for the proposed site plan residential unit development on East Rainer listed for tonight's meeting agenda. Please accept this letter in our absence as we are unable to attend the meeting. Please read this letter into the meeting minutes. A development of this size and nature is too large for that location and not considering all the other ramifications. First, the development of that size will drastically increase traffic on East Drainer. It is already hard to see turning off Oxford Lakes onto Drainer, but with increased traffic, it will surely become dangerous. Additionally, the intersection of Drainer and 24 is already dangerous with several accidents a month there. Adding that many units will increase traffic through that dangerous intersection, increasing the number of traffic accidents and putting additional strain on first responders. Second, a development of that size is not taking into account the impact it will have on our already overcrowded schools. Lakeville Elementary is already crowded, and the number of classrooms and staff will not be able to support an increase of students from a development that size. Although the school might be able to adjust over the years if more funding is passed, we know the school funding is not immediate. However, the increased needs will be putting our students, school staff, and resources at a breaking point. Finally, the environmental impact of the development that large cannot be overlooked. Oxford is a beautiful township, known and sought out for its beautiful natural areas. Plowing down trees, natural habitats of wildlife, and contaminating wetlands and lakes with runoff is not what this community wants. The Oxford community does not want to give up our natural beauty and small town feel by cramming in housing wherever there is an open field. We are not a large city, nor are the residents looking to become one. Please consider all aspects of what a build this size will do to harm, not help. Please keep Oxford beautiful, safe, and a township that looks, that others look to in high regard. Thank you, Chad and Sarah Humshite. So we have a motion and a second to accept these. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, that carries. So then, go back to my agenda. Number 7, commission discussion. I know we all have lists, hopefully some of those were addressed. What I would say is we can start at one end and go through what questions or concerns you might still have for the applicant or our team over here. You want to start?
I can start. I mean, there's a very long, there's a long list that I have, but you know, as I want to, you know, kind of start by saying, you know, I want what's best for the community. I want what's best for new developments that come in. And I also want to state that the property owner also has rights to develop the property as well. In both cases, they own the property and they can do with the property as they kind of want. You know, one of the things is that, you know, I look at this and from a traditional standpoint, from the R1A, the property owner does have the right to put, you know, completely fill in that lot and completely, you know, if they wanted to, cut down every single tree related to in that whole in that property because it's his property and they have the right to do that. Now, am I in agreement with that? No, by no means am I in agreement with that. I wouldn't want that because that's not what I want what's best for, the best for our community and what's best for for a development. And as I look at as I look at this PUD and look at it from is it better than the traditional development that can be in there? Yes, I believe it can be visually much better. I believe that the landscape can be much better. Do I want to save as many trees as we possibly can in there? Yes. Do I want to protect our wetlands? Yes. Do I want to protect our lakes? Yes. But I think we still have a few things that we need to overcome, that we have questions that we need to probably discuss as a commission to outline maybe one by one to kind of get through some of those very specific concerns. So I don't know how we want to handle that, but that was my comment in the very beginning of what I wanted to say.
My suggestion is you had a list of 8 variances. I mean, obviously we're dealing with the legality of this. The preliminary site plan, the question is, do they meet all of the objectives? Is there any legal reason that this shouldn't move forward? Now, they are asking for some variances. My suggestion is we knock those out and say, those are satisfied, move forward. Those are not satisfied, we'll put condition and go from there. You had a list of what, 8?
My count was 8. I don't know.
Which I know they had 6
Yeah.
because some of them were.
I don't know if I go to the
split
bank
up.
with that, but I'm just saying,
Okay.
if you'd like to start through them with the help of our consultants, we could possibly work through those.
My suggestion is to go through those 8 and see where we're standing.
I guess maybe one of the key points that I put on here is that the question is, not with all of the changes, like there's a lot of very specific things, but does the design and does the plan meet the requirements of the PUD? Does it meet all of the 4 requirements to be considered as a PUD?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
There is 4 requirements that's been spelled out for us.
Yes.
And maybe we should go through each one of those
Let's
in
do
open
it.
dialogue.
Go through those 4.
Recognizing some middle of benefit. Hate to repeat, this has already been through tonight, but the residential plan unit development must provide a recognizable and substantial benefit both to the end user of the development and the overall community beyond what could be otherwise be realized for conventional development using the standards of the underlying zoning district or of this ordinance.
What are your thoughts?
That's the one that I have trouble with out of the 4. I put together a summary of modification and waivers to the PUD. I tried to go through all the consultants' paperwork to glean the best I could out of what waivers we needed, what waivers those were impacted. I also looked at the map and very concerned about the wetlands, very concerned about the approval of the wetlands. Also along some of the setbacks on regards to, I have my map on Oxford Lake Drive, as well as the other side, the Far East Drive. So off the top of the cuff, I question whether we recognizable and substantial benefit has been provided in this tonight. Now, I'm not saying that things couldn't be taken out of here tonight, and the applicant could come back with changes. One thing I will note that the applicant's drawings and things were dated the 26th of February. Our letters from our consultants and things were dated, some of them were dated March 6th, some were dated March 11th. So we had a time period between when this was submitted and the time period in which we're discussing tonight and the time period in which our consultants had the time to respond. Did the applicants receive those 3 letters from our 2 letters from our consultants? Did you have knowledge of what they were writing? Would be one of the questions I would ask.
Sure, we received all the letters.
Okay. So, you had, was there, do we have an open dialogue?
Please go ahead.
you had a chance to review those letters, and you didn't get back with us on those letters.
Yes,
so
we
you-
did. Yeah. We met with staff and discussed our view of the comments, and those have been received.
Were those incorporated into the drawings and into the plans and things, or, I'm trying to piece this together. I'm trying to do my best job at 10:21 at night.
So yes, the applicant received the letters. They, and they've responded. I think what and their response was they would like to have your opinion on the modifications that are proposed. And also your opinion on whether they meet those benefit, the standards of recognizable benefits and in superior design, because those were the two outstanding, at least from our letter, that were there. You know, we cited some specific things, but at the end of the day, those standards are up to you, as to what's recognizable benefit and what's superior design. There are some parameters in the zoning ordinance. So they had our letters, they responded. I think the applicant chose not to do a full revision and resubmission. I think there may have been one or two written letters that were in response, that were in your packets.
I personally feel the commission's been put in a difficult spot tonight. We have a tremendous amount of modification and waivers. We have your documentation that has questions laced throughout it about what needs to be added to the site plan, the preliminary site plan. We have Mr. Sharp's documentation that says things of the same sort. So I feel like it's very difficult for us to put this all together tonight to come up with a decision of possible approval or a decision of possible denial, which I don't want to stand in the way of development here in the township. We had the traffic study we talked about tonight. We talked about landscaping. We talked about open space. We talked about superior design. We talked about public dedicated space. We talked about architectural details. And I can go on for 5 more. So I just want to just close with that. I'm looking for support or some guidance from the rest of the board.
Well, John, from my standpoint, one of the major things is understanding the traffic study. There appeared to be a number of questions about whether all of Ellymore residents were accounted for, or vehicles, or these future areas in addition to what they thought for this subdivision, and whether that would have some kind of major impact on what would have to be done road-wise. I mean, while we're looking at this in the future, we need to make sure we've done due diligence with the data to cover that whole area, because that whole area is growing. We know that.
Maybe a question that I have then is, okay, so we have a traffic study. What do you do with the data from the traffic study? Township doesn't control the roads. Township doesn't own the roads. MDOT does. We have, even though we have a study, we have no control over any of that. And developments do come in, and you know you're going to get additional traffic. I hate the traffic, but additional developments create additional traffic. It's what a study. What do you do with the data? If you can't control what the roads, so what happens with the roads anyways?
Well, but you got the documentation then to go and talk to the road commission and to the state.
But I think my question is that a requirement for this? Is that a reason not to move forward? I mean, obviously it's a concern, but is that a reason to say no?
No. You can say, you can say it's a reason to say no.
I think possibly it's one of many, and that's what we're dealing with tonight, is not
Right.
one or two, we're dealing with many. And I think that's the frustration of my part, and maybe possibly other members of the board, is there's just many, many things to openly discuss.
Yeah.
Don brought out, you know, he was great on hitting the master plan, and I'm a big one on the master plan. How does this fit with the master plan? But I'm also understanding enough that I've dealt with the master plan, that whether it is a PUD or whether it is a basic R1A subdivision, the owner of that property has rights to develop that property and do things with that property as long as it meets state standards, as long as it meets township ordinances and standards, and as long as it works within our master plan. So we're in a very difficult situation on how this should be handled and moving forward. And if any one of our consultants can shed some light on to help me out here, I would be much appreciative. So you picked the tired one.
Yeah, I still got more to give. So good evening again. If this commission wants to approve a conditional approval tonight, which all of your consultants have given you a pathway forward to do so, you're not giving final site plan approval tonight. You're being asked for preliminary approval. So some of these issues can be addressed to the developer to basically bring back something that addresses some of the issues raised by the public that may be pertinent to this planning commission and related to the standards of the ordinance. I want to remind the planning commission that we have to stick to the standards of our zoning ordinance to address some of those concerns. I also know that you will have what's called a planned unit development agreement that can address issues of concern to the planning commission, and conditions that you want to be put into that agreement can also be a condition of approval. So did that answer your question,
Yes,
Commissioner?
and I've got a question. If we preliminary approve this with conditions, does it come back as a final site plan, or does it come back as a new preliminary for review? And do we have to have another public hearing?
Okay, so that was a couple
Two
questions in
yes,
one.
Yeah, I understand.
So if they come back for a if you deny their preliminary site plan tonight or you table it, yes, you have to have another public hearing under the terms of your ordinance. Anytime you're considering a preliminary site plan approval, you have to hold a public hearing. That's by your zoning ordinance. What I would recommend is if there are issues that can be cleaned up between now and final site plan approval, you add those as conditions, and those will be worked on by your administration, your consultants, to ensure that all of that's wrapped up by the time it's presented to you for final site plan approval. If you have significant changes to the plan to meet the requirements set forth under the zoning ordinance, that's a different matter where you would request that come back again for preliminary site plan approval. But if it's just we need a couple issues addressed by this developer per consultant reviews, or per, issues pertinent to those zoning ordinance provisions, that's when a conditional approval can be appropriate.
So,
One question, I mean, just to make this simple. Tonight, we're looking for a conditional approval. I mean, in the simplest way I can say it. A conditional approval to do this, or if not, they're gonna do the other plan. Safe to say?
I wouldn't say it's guaranteed that are you asking me, are they gonna do the
I mean,
plan
they
that
have the
they would
option
do
of-
under a straight zoning?
Following the straight zoning, or doing the PUD. And that's what they're asking for tonight, is conditional and to do the PUD. If we said no, they can do this without.
They can, I don't know that developer wants to do that, they can come back, with a different PUD plan or discuss with township administration what might work to bring back to the planning commission to address their concerns. What I would say, however, is yes, they can they can develop it under the current zoning. And the goal of PUD is to allow some flexibility in your zoning ordinance, not just ignoring your zoning ordinance, but some flexibility to allow a development that makes more sense than what can be done under a straight zoning. And by makes more sense, I mean provides a benefit to your community.
So to approve a conditional approval, then we can bring up some of our concerns to say during final, we want to see this, this, and this added in those negotiations.
Correct, unless you have significant changes to the site plan, that's a different issue. I'd bring it back for preliminary in that case, but if you just want specific concerns addressed, i.e., can you reduce this variance on your setback on the road, for example? I don't know, you know, whatever the concerns of this planning commission may be, those are things that can be addressed between your preliminary and your final, and they're not submitting a plan until they have addressed all those issues pertinent to this commission.
I think the challenge to the board tonight is, do we have any significant issues that will prevent this from advancing as a preliminary site plan? I'm not saying that there's not many waivers and modifications stacked up on the site from our consultants, but I challenge the board tonight, do we have any significant issues?
And I would just add, when you say significant issues, I would say significant issues that you can tie directly to your zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
Correct. That's kind of where I was going, but yeah.
We have issues. We have issues in modification waivers. I wrote up many pages, you know, of this tonight, but they're not significant enough to say this is not a preliminary PUD approval with conditions.
Well, that's up to the planning commission to determine.
That's
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
So that's a question I have. Is there anything significant enough to not move forward with a preliminary condition?
Corey, the one thing that I see is the 100-foot from the property line. It's clearly stated in the PUD, it's in the ordinance. And that would affect the layout of the site.
So that may be something you want to ask developer tonight, you know, with that, are
Right.
you willing, can we work on that? So with that, I'll,
I also want to stress that you have the ability to waive that 100-foot.
Right, I don't disagree. Yeah,
Underneath those circumstances that are in the zoning ordinance,
And that's part of the waivers that we would go through.
yes.
And I guess one question, what are the pros and cons of giving that waiver or not giving that waiver? That's something that was unclear to me.
So, the intent of the 100-foot buffer is order to preserve view sheds. And so, there is a unique circumstance on the eastern, on the western property line with the spike strip, that it's an unusual circumstance where there are gonna be some natural features preserved because it's just gonna be as is because the developer doesn't have control over it. In terms of on the other side, you know, the question is whether, as that is designed, does it meet those standards? Does it result in a better development? So that's what you should be looking at. If you say we don't want to grant that waiver, that's a significant change. The developer likely will lose a number of lots, and that will really affect their bottom line and perhaps their ability to do the PUD because they're looking at a certain amount of lots. Did I answer your question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
So the question is that significant enough? Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I don't think that particular waiver is significant enough. If you add them all together and say no to all the waivers, that's significant. My question now is that if we don't have any significant issues, and we say that we can, according to our zoning ordinance, say, in our master plan, say we can move forward with the preliminary site plan, then how do we capture all the other things that we've discussed tonight? That's my question. How are those captured? Checks and balances, how do we do it?
Have you been taking notes? Because I'm gonna tell you to put it in your motion as a condition.
But with all due respect, I'm not confident I have all the different things. Your motions that we worked so hard on in the past usually reference our excellent consultants that
They
are up
do.
after 10:30 at night. Would that suffice to take care of all of our issues?
So the motion, I have prepared a proposed motion that would incorporate every single condition placed on the recommended approval as set forth in your planner's review, your engineer's review, my review, and township administration's review. However, if there's anything outside of those reports that this commission feels needs to be addressed, they would need to add that into the motion.
And that's where it gets difficult, muddy for me tonight.
Well, what would you have that's not on that list?
Well, there were some recommendations from Carlisle Workman on things with landscaping. You may want to do these things in her write-up. It's not a go-do, it's you may want to.
But does your motion cover that?
My motion covers what's directly written in her report. So if anything is outside of the scope of that, it is not covered by the motion. So I'll let.
In terms of the two things that we put with the landscaping plan, I think if you added to the motion that the revised landscaping plan uses native species and preserves existing vegetation and trees to the greatest extent possible, would cover it. And then also, we had mentioned about superior design, and those specifically cited some things with the elevations of in the elevations of the proposed architecture. I think you could simply cite that the proposed architecture must meet the design guidelines that's in the residential PUD regulations.
I didn't get it word for word.
Okay, so I'll repeat, the landscape plan should use native species
Native species.
and protect existing trees and vegetation to the greatest extent possible. And the architecture of the proposed buildings must meet the architectural design regulations in the residential PUD article in the township zoning ordinance.
Please stay right there. May I speak?
Please.
Mr. Developer, can you live with those two extra things that Megan
Yes, we
just
can.
talked about?
Yes, we can.
There's only one more thing, and if this is to the board's desire. Mr. Sharp had in there a waiver for the drainage system on the, to the retention pond on Oxford Lakes Drive in your write-up. Page 2.
Storm sewer?
The storm sewer, you see that, Jim?
Yep.
I don't have it in front of me.
Right here.
We talked about that today.
But just so the rest of the commission understands
Correct.
what that is, generally before you go to a detention pond or something, again, we talked about these mechanical pre-treatment devices, or you put a sediment pond, or you put something in there to filter out the, all the debris that can get into a storm sewer system. Currently, on the plan, again, it's not fully engineered, but in their the plan that has been submitted before you tonight, in the rear yards of some of the lots along Oxford Lakes Drive, they have a storm sewer line that runs down through there, and then it's going to run to a detention pond in the corner, be the southwest corner of the site. Okay? It's not gonna be very much water, and the reason that I have no objections to the lack of a pretreatment device is because, again, those pretreatment devices are to collect things coming off the streets generally, salts, oils, sediment, things like that. This is all gonna be running over grass from, we'll just say that we'll take the building and say it's split in half, and the front portion is gonna drain to the road, and the back part's gonna drain to the rear storm sewer. So all of that would be filtered anyway before it gets into the storm sewer system. So there shouldn't be any debris or anything that's getting in there before it gets into the storm sewer and then heads down to the detention pond. And I believe that detention pond can be fairly small because it's not picking up a lot of rainwater. It's just the rear yards of some of those multi-family buildings.
And not to put words in your mouth, but we have a natural filter as that's coming down through the yards and through the.
Yeah, generally that's what's happening. It's going overland through the grass and everything that's filtering out through there, yes.
Thank you. Mr.
I was just gonna ask, that's the one that ends up being in the road ditch?
So it goes to a pond, a small pond in the corner of the property.
But the overflow.
And then, yeah, there'll be a small pipe or something that outlets to that ditch that it will be in the road commission right of way. Again, they will need a permit to do that. That'll be part of the rest of the plan with all the improvements. If it's in the right of way, then they'll have to get approval from the road commission to do that. But that's their intended plan right now, yes. Do you have anything?
I was just gonna say, that's gonna be a restricted flow, right?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
just like any other development that's out there, yeah, restricted flow, correct.
That was a comment, I think. Go.
Yep,
Thank you.
okay, yes.
Mr. Chair, if nobody else has any comments or any thoughts, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
But there's gonna be two things we're gonna add to this motion. One was the landscaping plan, the architect of the building. I may struggle with those, so I may need some help.
Okay.
So please bear with me. This is from our legal expert, legal counsel, who does a very good job, but she's very thorough. I move to grant preliminary site plan approval for PC file number 23-005, known by the project name the Peninsula of Tullamore / Villages of Tullamore, based on the following findings of facts. The residential plan unit development shall provide recognizable and substantial benefit both to the end user of the development and the overall community beyond what could be otherwise be realized from a conventional development using the standards of the underlying zoning district or this ordinance. Number 2, the applicant has or will have full ownership or control of all the area to be included in the residential plan unit development, such that there is a single person responsible for the full completion of the project. Number 3, all land included within the residential plan unit development is contiguous. And number 4, the residential plan unit development shall provide at least 2 superior design elements as defined in 14.8C of our superior design found in our ordinance. Such preliminary, I'm going to add the scope, the landscaping plan should be subject to the native species and protect the invasive existing trees to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah, I think we get the intent.
Existing, just to clarify, Mr. Knoll, existing rather than invasive.
I got that, but it didn't. And then the second one I'll need help on is the architectural.
That the architecture for the proposed housing meets the standards set forth in Article 14, the residential plan unit development. to the zoning ordinance.
Thank you. Such preliminary approval shall be conditioned on applicants completing and submitting the following in its request for final site plan approval. 1, applicant providing the information required by the township zoning ordinance as set forth in the report submitted by the township consultants, township fire department, and the township administration. And 2, the applicant's submittal of revised plans addressing states, deficiencies, and reports submitted by the township consultants, the township fire department, and the township administration, including an agreement to address the issues of existing conservation,
Conservation.
thank you, conservation easement on the site.
Okay, we have a motion,
I'll second it.
we have a motion, we have a second, any discussion?
So just to be clear, this is a motion to approve
Approve
preliminary,
Preliminary, yes,
and this gives us the ability to come back and talk about these modifications.
correct,
I need to understand, because, you know, our PUD clearly indicates this 100-foot,
correct,
and that this gives us the ability to work through that
correct.
with the developer, that they would then work to comply within that rule. I see a hand by our
Yes.
legal.
Or a modification.
This is a significant change, is what you're getting to, I'm gonna assume.
I was going to say, if you're granting preliminary approval tonight, and unless it's indicated in the motion, you're approving those waivers from the zoning ordinance as presented by the developer tonight.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. It's getting late and I'm
Oh,
confused right now.
I
know we all
understand,
are.
I understand. If you grant preliminary approval tonight, the motion that Commissioner Nold read into the record does incorporate concerns raised by the planning commission tonight, as well as the deficiencies noted in the consultant reviews. However, what it did not do is address that 100-foot requirement and remove that from a granted waiver. So if you grant the motion as presented by Mr. Knoll tonight, you're granting approval for that waiver from the zoning ordinance.
That was those 8, what I counted was 8 waivers that they talked, the different consultants talked about it within their write-ups.
Right. So there's I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, were you going to?
No, go ahead.
I was just, so the 100-foot, I keep on getting back to this, but it's clearly outlined in the PUD, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to, I can't make another motion at this point. Right, yeah, this motion has to be moved on, so, okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, we don't have a secretary tonight, so I would still like a roll call vote. Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Don, I'm not gonna check.
Velocic.
Velocic?
No.
Bailey, yes. So that gives us 4 votes, the motion carries. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to number 10, unfinished business, which we have none. Any new business? Communication.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for us to, between now and the next meeting or a following meeting, to talk about some of these things that seem to be really concerns of the community, to somehow, whether it's not anything not traffic as much as it's handled by other entities, but the woodlands, preserving woodlands, there's other things that we can committee.
Recess, or are you gonna?
What's that? No, we're still in a meeting.
Still in session.
Right. So,
You wanna call for
yeah, we'll take a break for 2 minutes. We'll let them clear.
I think there's some obscure.
Ma'am?
You know, there's a lot of.
Continue.
John, would you repeat what you just said, please?
I want to, at this point, put something on the agenda regarding, preserving woodlands and preserving other preservation things that we can, when we have a development like this come along, we have maybe some stronger language to help us preserve trees, as an example, to preserve
So you're
wooded
looking for
areas.
possibly an
And-
ordinance, a landscaping ordinance that would include
Sure, call
landscaping? Okay.
it that, call
I
it tree
understand.
preservation
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I've been told that it's been, put on the table once in the past, and maybe it's time to look at it again and get the community's input.
Sure.
Because it seems to be a strong point, preserving, so, thank you.
Yeah, and matter of fact, we'll get to 12A. Economic
I agree
development.
with you on that too.
And we don't have anything for economic development? Ordinance review, do we have any update? And that actually is a good time to bring that up, that's something that we could have the ordinance,
We
add
add that to our.
that to our agenda to discuss and look at, because, yeah, we are starting to hear a lot of that.
Either something new or an addition or adjustment to what we have.
Okay.
No report, we recorded last time, and our next meeting is May 9th, so.
Okay. Number 13, planner and engineer reports. You guys probably don't have a big long thing you want to go through. do
Oh, I
you?
got a list. Hope you guys didn't have to be anywhere tonight. No, from just the planning report, just a few quick items. You guys are aware that the signing ordinance has kind of cleared all the hurdles that it needs to, so it'll be effective sometime mid next month. But we're starting to kind of field and answer questions from applicants as they come in as it relates to that ordinance. And then the master plan at the next meeting will kind of pick up where we left off at our last master plan update at the May 9th meeting, and start diving deeper into the future land use and a few of the chapters to start going over.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Sorry to make you sit here all night just for that.
Well, I haven't been here in a little while, you know.
You
You guys
haven't
have been
been
talking
here
about
in
the
weeks,
master
dude.
plans,
It's
and you
time to
haven't
get
seen
caught
me.
up.
So, over the past few months, you've probably been seeing this in your packet, which is it's just kind of an overview of activity that's going on in the community. So, I've been doing it for the township board for a little while. They had asked for it, and I don't know if it was Mr. Knoll or Mr. Bailey who asked for it, but, so that's in your packet now, and if you ever have any questions in the interim, most of you have my number, and I will get you mine, because I don't know if you have it, but you're always welcome to call me if you have any questions, comments on this. If you'd like to see more, then I can try to add more, but this is basically what's going to the township board, so we're just keeping you informed of both. The second page is probably what you're more interested in, is the private development projects portion of it. The first one is municipal, where we're talking about water and sewer and roads and things like that. So, but anyway, hopefully it's a good guide for you.
Thank you very much. Seeing nothing else, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.